Good morning and welcome to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners Policy Session on January 24, 2024. County Administrator Gary Schmidt, you're up.
Thank you, Chair Smith. Commissioners Schrader and West are on their way. They will be here. Quickly, a schedule update. So at your request, Commissioners, we are going to add the sessions you did not complete yesterday following today's session. So the order will go is what was already published, Public Housing Repositioning Plan first, followed by the Water Environment Services Capital Improvement Plan, then going back to yesterday's discussion on Measure 110 Value Statement and concluding with the remainder of your issues list. We will keep going until around the noon hour. We'll take a 30-minute break for lunch, and then we'll reconvene after that 30-minute break to finish the business. So we'll go as long or short as you'd like today, Commissioners. That is our plan.
Thank you.
With that, Chair, would you please convene as the Housing Authority of Clackamas County?
I will recess as the Board of County Commissioners and convene as the Housing Authority of Clackamas County.
All right, you're now meeting as the Housing Authority Board of Clackamas County. This policy session is Public Housing Repositioning Plan Update. Our staff from the Housing Authority and Health, Housing, and Human Services staff will present. Joining you online is Housing Commissioner Ann Leenstra. Good morning, Ann.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. All right, to start off is Rod Cook, Director of Health, Housing, and Human Services, and Devin Ellen, who is Housing Development Director for the Clackamas County Housing Authority. Go ahead, please.
Welcome, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us. Good morning, Commissioners. We're here this morning seeking board affirmation to, one, continue pursuing the recommendations outlined in the updated Public Housing Repositioning Plan. And then two, we're also seeking direction on whether to proceed with exploring the opportunity to increase the county's recovery-oriented infrastructure as part of the scattered site disposition process. And we know that four of you were involved on the front end of this, and so we will go into a little bit of history, just so for the Commissioner West, we'll hear some of the history on this. All binding actions related to repositioning will be brought to you at a later time. Today's policy session is only intended as an update on progress to date and confirmation around next steps. As you know, the Housing Authority of Clackamas County has the oldest public housing in Oregon and among the oldest in the nation. As federal funding to maintain public housing has decreased for decades, public housing agencies across the country, including our Housing Authority, are struggling to adequately maintain their aging housing stock. In 2018, recognizing the significant backlog of capital needs and solidifying its intent to remove itself from public housing administration, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, established a number of programs to allow public housing agencies flexibility to reposition their portfolios and develop locally appropriate strategies to preserve affordable housing. The combination of these HUD programs and local funding from Affordable Housing Bond and the Supportive Housing Services Measure has given the county a once-in-a-generation opportunity to, one, modernize its public housing agency, two, replace aging affordable housing stock, three, preserve critical affordable housing options, and four, increase the overall inventory of affordable housing, including in rural areas. Following years of planning, the board, including four of you, approved the first version of the Clackamas County's Public Housing Repositioning Plan during a policy session on March 9th, 2022. This plan set out a high-level framework to reposition Hillside Park, that was 100 units there, Oregon City View Manor, that has 100 units, Clackamas Heights, that has 100 units, and the scattered site single-family residences, which is 145 of those. The high-level framework laid out the potential options for repositioning each asset with the overall goal of determining the highest and best use for each within the parameters allowed by HUD. Since 2022, staff have been collecting, operating, and market data, assessing value, conducting physical needs assessments and environmental reviews, and doing site and zoning analysis, all with the goal of updating the repositioning plan to include specific recommendations for each site. Today's policy session is to update you on these specific recommendations and talk about next steps. We are bringing this to you now because we're at a point in the process where actions related to the recommendations will start coming to you more frequently for formal approval. This includes things like authorization to submit HUD disposition applications, formation of tax credit entities to carry out development activities, pre-development and construction management contracts, development agreements, and resolutions authorizing related actions. You've already approved some of these items for the Hillside Park, with construction scheduled to start in June. We can't tell you how excited we are to be here with you today about the opportunity that presents itself for Clackamas County. The recommendations here today will convert 445 units of obsolete affordable housing into 445 housing vouchers, 750 units of new affordable housing, and free up between $40 million to $50 million in funding for additional development. And with that, I'll hand it over to our expert, Devin Ellen.
Welcome, Ellen.
Good morning, Commissioners. As Rod notes, the repositioning framework covers the 4 remaining public housing properties in HAC's portfolio. In the case of Hillside Park, repositioning activities under Section 18 are already underway. In the other cases, various repositioning options have been considered and vetted, and today we are presenting staff recommendations for your consideration. I will briefly summarize our recommendation for each property. They're detailed in your packet with the intention of leaving ample time to answer questions. So first, I'll start with Hillside Park. As you are well aware, pre-development activities are underway. The Section 18 application for Phase 1 was approved by HUD, and with the recent award of 4% low-income housing tax credits, all necessary funding has been assembled. We are planning to break ground, as Rod noted, on the first 275 units this June. Relocation of residents residing in Phase 1 is underway. Each Phase 1 household has been offered a tenant protection voucher, and they are receiving assistance from a relocation specialist to find suitable replacement housing. We anticipate all residents will be relocated by the end of April. All relocated households will be given the first option to return to a newly constructed unit at Hillside Park once they are complete. In the coming weeks, staff will be bringing the development agreement with Related Northwest to the board for consideration. And a considerable amount of planning and advocacy, especially from this board, has brought us to this point, and I am thrilled to see this project enter the construction phase. Planning for the second phase, which will include up to 225 new units, is underway. HUD has already approved the Section 18 justification, and now the next step is to submit the disposition application for the remaining Phase 2 units. So next up, we have Clackamas Heights. The Housing Authority recently engaged Bora Architecture to help envision the redevelopment of Clackamas Heights. Starting next month, HAC and the design team will begin the community engagement and concept planning process. One of the Housing Authority's primary objectives is to ensure its residents are provided opportunities to influence decision-making during the planning and design process. HAC is planning to redevelop the Clackamas Heights property under Section 18, and the proposed investment of $20 million from proceeds of the scattered site portfolio and $15 million in Metro Affordable Housing bonds will allow the authority to leverage tax credit equity and tax-exempt bond financing to redevelop the existing 100-unit development with up to 250 new units. In the coming weeks and months, staff will be seeking board approval to form the tax credit entity, enter into a pre-development and construction management contract, and submit a Section 18 application to HUD. The third property we'd like to discuss today is the Oregon City View Manor, or OCVM for short. Located less than a half mile up the road from Clackamas Heights, OCVM is a 100-unit public housing development situated on approximately 20 sloped acres. Given the lack of nearby services and amenities and limited public transportation options, the Park Place neighborhood is not well suited to support additional affordable units beyond the 250 contemplated at Clackamas Heights. Staff determined that reinvesting the proceeds from the sale of OCVM is in more service-rich locations throughout the county is the highest and best use for the asset. The as-is sale of the property is estimated to generate between $12 and $16 million. In addition, HAC recently commissioned a physical needs assessment of the property, and it was determined that the property meets the obsolescence threshold under Section 18. And this means the units have substantial physical issues that cannot be corrected in a cost-effective manner. For these reasons, staff is recommending disposition under Section 18. The redevelopment of Clackamas Heights with up to 250 units will provide the Housing Authority the ability to accommodate all households currently living at both Clackamas Heights and OCVM. And all residents displaced due to the disposition of OCVM will receive a tenant protection voucher and relocation assistance, and all OCVM residents will be given the option to move to a new unit at the Clackamas Heights development once it's complete. In addition, the Housing Authority has ensured that any household living in public housing that is displaced due to a repositioning activity will be given waitlist priority in all of the new bond and voucher-supported affordable units that are coming online throughout Clackamas County. So finally, this brings us to the scattered site portfolio. As is the case with most housing authorities across the nation, administrative and maintenance costs are highest for scattered site portfolios due to inefficiencies of systems and management. This is especially true for our housing authority, given the portfolio is primarily single-family homes with a wide geographic distribution throughout the county. HUD recognizes this financial burden and has created a specific justification under Section 18 for scattered site portfolios. The sale of the 145-unit scattered site portfolios is expected to generate approximately $50 million. The proceeds, which are restricted under HUD rules for affordable housing, could be reinvested in the redevelopment of Clackamas Heights and further developments throughout the county, including outside the urban growth boundary. For these reasons, staff is recommending disposition under Section 18. However, while a tenant protection voucher will be generated for every unit converted under Section 18, staff recognizes the importance of trying to preserve the affordability these units provide. So rather than selling all of these units to the private market, staff are proposing that approximately 25 homes be sold as affordable homeownership opportunities to existing residents through a land trust model. This is further outlined in your packet. 45 homes will be sold to the private market, and 75 homes be sold under restrictions that meet the county's goal to expand recovery-oriented infrastructure, which Adam and Vahid can talk more about during the question and answer. With this board's guidance, the next step towards repositioning the scattered site portfolio is to finalize the proposed disposition method. Once this is determined, subsequent steps, including seeking support for the disposition from localities in which the homes are located, submitting the application to HUD, and proceeding with tenant relocation and the sale of properties. So I know you likely have a lot of questions, but before I conclude, I want to reiterate that in every Section 18 process outlined here today, with the one-to-one allocation of vouchers for every unit repositioned, the county will not lose a single unit of affordable housing capacity, and not one public housing resident will be made homeless as a result of the disposition. In fact, the opposite is true. We will increase our overall housing options and end homelessness for many more households. And again, all residents displaced due to Section 18 disposition will receive this tenant protection voucher and relocation assistance. And all residents must be relocated before the physical disposition process can proceed. All displaced residents will be given the option to move to a new unit once redevelopment is complete and/or given waitlist priority in a newly developed bond or voucher-supported affordable unit. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
I want to thank staff for bringing a very unique and comprehensive proposal before this board. Your recommendations, I think, are right on. They don't surprise me whatsoever. I want to thank Bronner and Associates for taking the time and due diligence to analyze these properties. I do have some questions, and I'm sure all the board members will want to weigh in on this. On the scattered sites, those pose a unique opportunity for people to obtain home ownership when the market conditions are such that so unaffordable, they can't do that. On the 25 homes to be sold as affordable ownership through a land trust model, has that process or rules have been developed for that yet?
We have a strategy that's been developed.
So some of these homes are pretty old, and are they going to be in better condition than they are now when these people take over home ownership? Because on affordable homes, most of the, won't have the expense to fix broken pipes or understand how to do it. Are you going to train them and what home ownership means, and that, yes, you do have to take care of what you own. You just can't let properties languish.
That's a great question, and that's why we're partnering with the Land Trust. So Proud Ground,
Okay.
all of their residents go through
So
financial
you're going
training.
to partner with Proud Ground?
Yep.
Okay, I'm very familiar with that. I like that program. Also, in the land trust on Proud Ground, so they buy into the properties, they appreciate over time, but when they sell it, they get part of the proceeds, but not all. What's the percentage of that? 40%?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I will get back to you on that.
Okay, because that's important.
It is a split, though.
It is important. And going forward on a lot of these, I really like Proud Ground, and I really like Habitat for Humanity, because it's an opportunity to acquire home ownership where it is becoming more and more difficult for first-time home buyers. And just so you know, yesterday afternoon, there was a mayor's and chair meeting, and all of the mayors for Clackamas County showed up on our Zoom meeting, and this was a very big topic that the mayors were talking about in their areas, home ownership. Two mayors in particular, Oregon City Mayor, which one of these properties or many of these located, and Wilsonville Mayor want to do that. So when I look down at the Oregon City View Manor, you're talking about disposing that, and how many acres is that?
Approximately 20.
20 acres. Why, I understand we could sell it for $12 to $16 million, but I don't think we're strapped for cash. Maybe we are, I don't know. Why not take this site and turn it into a Proud Ground or a Habitat for Humanity and make it affordable for people to purchase? Had you considered that? Hello? It's not the recommendation from Bronner. Matter of fact, we only have 25 homes out of this whole portfolio for an opportunity for people with low income to actually become homeowners. We have 45 homes to be sold to the private market, okay? Whatever. 75 homes sold under restrictions on a recovery-oriented infrastructure, of which we'll talk about in a minute. But as we move forward, it seems to be we have a very rich portfolio, and I know these properties well. I've been to them all. I understand this. When I was a commissioner last time, a long time ago, we had discussed this and brought this idea forward, and now it's finally coming to fruition, and I am very, very excited about this. But as we know, the opportunity for people to buy a home and have a piece of something that has been escaping, and I'm sure there's going to be sidebars, I'm sure there's going to be rules attached, but Commissioner Schrader and I, we worked on Habitat for Humanity projects. We actually helped build the structures.
In Lake Oswego.
Yeah.
There's
Lake
a huge
Oswego.
habitat.
I did
Yeah.
one in, yep, and I did one in Salem, and
There you go. Good
it's
one.
just such a rewarding experience.
We did it in Canby.
Commissioners, we have a lot of discussion. I believe Commissioner Savas, you're up first.
Yeah, I appreciate the long haul. This has been, I appreciate the good work you've all done, and those in the back as well. So it's great to be here at this point. However, I recall a discussion here in 2022, I think you referenced that, or 2021, with Jill Smith when we were talking about this positioning thing. And part of the discussion was, or the concerns I had raised was long-term. And I think short-term, long-term has a different relevance when we're talking about different things. In housing and property, to me, long-term, I'm thinking beyond 60 years or 70 years and the purpose of the housing authority. So the part I'm still unsettled with is if we not on the scattered sites so much as these larger properties like Hillside and Oregon City Manor and Clackamas Heights, all of those. My concern is that if these are purchased by a private entity with no deed restrictions or nothing that says after, let's say, 60 years and they're in poor condition, they need to be renovated, they're no longer, if they are no longer the property or have any kind of deed restriction, then, we lose our ability to offer affordable housing, and that's my concern is the long term. So I am really wondering if there are models in which we have either a deed restriction that says it will be retained for public housing purposes, affordable public housing purposes, and/or options in which maybe we own the ground, okay? And then the private sector can own and operate the building above because, we're in an area, I don't expect property values to go down over 60 years. I expect it to be significantly higher. And not only the value, but there's just not a lot of property out there. They're not making any new land anymore, right? We are where we are. So that was an unsettled thing then, and Devin, have a lot of respect. I know you have a lot of knowledge. Rod, all of you in the room here. So can you enlighten me or encourage me into thinking beyond these structures' life or the contract life of 30, 50, 40, 60 years, whatever they may be?
Absolutely. So we heard you loud and clear, and we've structured Hillside Park so that the authority maintains the land. So the improvements will be owned by the partnerships, and the authority will ground lease the land. This is also our intention for Clackamas Heights. And I personally love the idea of Habitat or some similar entity at Oregon City View Manor, and I think that's something that we can go back and contemplate, and is definitely an option that we should explore. And in that case, I would imagine there would be restriction on the properties as well, long-term.
Right. And I do remember the discussion about Oregon City Manor and knowing that, what part had what density levels and limits, right, on building affordable housing or high-density affordable housing. And I don't know if today, if any of the state-mandated things change that environment so that it won't be so difficult. I do understand the cash value of that infusion if it was sold and helping to augment our needs. So I understand, the dynamics there a little bit, but not as intimately as you all do. But I just didn't know if there was, knowing that since we've talked, the scattered sites, the value has gone up, right? So I don't know if that's changed the financial position to where that rare piece of land where Oregon City Manor is today, granted it doesn't have the density levels, maybe some other sections would if we acquired it nearby, but any other updated thoughts, or are we still in the same conundrum there, if you will?
Well, for Clackamas Heights, we're considering a cottage cluster development, and I imagine that we could do that at Oregon City View Manor as well, and partner with an organization like Habitat to construct that.
Okay. Thank you.
A cottage cluster for rentals, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or for sale, potentially. I don't know, we'll have to look into that.
Okay. Gee, I'm not sure. I think Commissioner Scholl, you were next.
Yeah, thank you for this very detailed presentation this morning. I was impressed with your documents you presented to us here a few days ago. Question one is on the tenant protection vouchers. With the recent HUD decisions to get out of the housing market, if you will, is there a guarantee that those tenant protection vouchers will be available through the period of construction in which you'll need those?
So the trending of appropriations over time has trended downward for public housing assistance through HUD, and the other direction for Section 8 assistance. So that's why a lot of housing authorities are converting to Section 8. So, these contracts are 20 years typically. So I think that, barring some.
Yeah, so you're comfortable that the needed HUD assistance for housing vouchers will be there for you? Okay.
Yes.
And the second question was, on your expected sales of the scattered sites to bring in 50 million or thereabouts, I can see where the 45 homes to be sold to private market would bring in highest offer sales amounts. But for the 75 homes to be sold under restrictions that meet the county's goals to expand recovery-oriented infrastructure, did you take into consideration the potential for those 75 homes to sell at a lesser price in your estimate for 50 million bucks?
Great question. So HUD recommends that all homes, single-family homes, be sold at fair market value.
Okay.
And so that they don't bring down housing values
Okay.
of the surrounding properties. So what we've conceived here is some seller financing from the housing authority to support those units. And then that would be paid off through, in the case of the recovery-oriented units, with rental assistance from SHS and potentially capital infusion from the SHS program.
Yeah, okay. And one final question is on the OCVM project. Your documents indicate that part of your financing for the new construction of Hillsdale Park and Clackamas Heights depends on the sale of the OCVM property. Isn't that correct?
It depends on the sale of the scattered sites.
Yeah.
It's for the redevelopment of Clackamas Heights.
Okay, not on OCVM.
No.
Okay, good, thank you. That's all I have for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, my understanding was that actually the Lake Oswego site was a coalition, I think, between Proud Ground and Habitat. So that's a kind of a match made in heaven.
Right.
And I just wanted to go back to what Tootie mentioned. You said you had homes that you're going to sell at market value. Do we really need that to finance other projects, or can it all be turned into, with the work of
I don't
President?
believe we do. It just depends, what kind of resources we can bring to, the housing authority has, an immediate need for at least, I think, $10 to $20 million to subsidize Clackamas Heights.
Okay.
I think 10 upfront to get going. And then, so if we're able to, identify funds to pay for that,
Okay.
then I don't think we would need to sell all of the scattered sites or any of
Okay.
them on, to the public.
So it's just going to depend on, what the economics of it is. But I think that the notion is that, again, any that we can save to have it actually be affordable housing would be certainly my preference, depending on what the market's doing.
By affordable housing, you mean first-time home buyer?
Yep.
Assisted like
Yeah.
Proud Ground and
Okay.
Habitat for
If we
Humanity.
can maximize that, that's, which I suspect you're already doing, but,
I would
minute.
expect that you would know out of this entire presentation which sites would be more suitable for affordable purchase, whether it's the scattered sites or what I recommended, Oregon City View Manor may not be that suitable. I don't know. And I suppose, do we need to determine how many of those sites we would like you to look into? Because I think they're going to go like that. I really do. I mean, there's a whole working class of people, workforce development, people who are gainfully employed, hard workers, they cannot afford $350,000 for their first-time purchase, and let's face it, who can? I certainly didn't do that. I made the point when, at the meeting last night, yeah, when my husband and I purchased our first home, which seemed like 100 years ago as far as value is concerned, we were able to do it on sweat equity. We saved a few bucks, and it was not a mansion. We went in, we fixed it up over time, which I think a lot of people did. And I think that having a sweat equity component in this, that people need to understand that this is how you get ahead in life. And so I think this proposal's great, totally great. Commissioner Savas wants to talk, and then I want to go and talk about the opportunity to expand the recovery-oriented infrastructure. Okay, Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, I don't want to pretend that I know the financial plan as anywhere near what our staff do. So that being said, I just want to make sure that we're all being mindful that this financial plan that the board initiated, that staff's implementing way back in order to maximize the scattered site, the value of the scattered sites as monies to stimulate housing production in other areas that are get a lot more bang for the buck, if you will. So there's trade-offs in this, right? And I think that splitting some of that into the proposal laid out here with home ownership opportunities as well as the ability to build the capital needed to build the more significant housing and the volume of housing. So there's trade-offs here. And so we're relying on all of you to help us along with that, make sure we're cognizant, number two, that we got the means to the end. We need to see the entire picture and realize that the capital needs for Clackamas Heights and Hillside and all of those programs that we want to, all these properties we want to build, I think we get a lot more bang for the buck on the larger properties. So that's why we're disposing of the smaller properties. So there's trade-offs, but I just don't want to, let's be mindful that they've got a long-term plan that we initiated years back that they're implementing. And again, maybe we can tweak it here and there as we go. As values change and costs go up, I think there's just a lot of dynamics here that are taking place that we always need to monitor what we're doing. But just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go ahead with the second part of the presentation, if you don't mind. Welcome, and please introduce yourselves. Just for the viewing audience.
Thank you, Chair. Adam Brown, Deputy Director, Health, Housing, and Human Services.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioners, Vahid Brown, Deputy Director, Housing and Community Development.
So what Devin outlined for you with regard to the disposition of scattered sites is a proposal that we prioritize 75 of them for use as part of our recovery-oriented system of care. And I think this is really about as creative as it gets for a jurisdiction. It's a win-win-win. So we have really significant need for things like medical respite housing, high-needs behavioral health housing, recovery housing. And that we primarily use rent assistance vouchers with our regional long-term rent assistance program. Most of our supportive housing is vouchering people at private market units in the community. And frankly, for people with the most significant needs, we struggle to adequately support them in vouchered units throughout the community. And in talking with our service providers, many of whom use a scattered site, single-family home model, they say, we need access to more units. We have one service provider in the community that has a capital partner agency that they work with, and that agency goes out and buys single-family homes for them that provider then leases back through program operation funds to deliver this kind of service in a single-family home. And as part of those conversations, we thought to ourselves, whoa, wait a second. We have 145 single-family homes. Can we work as a jurisdiction with our community to potentially, you've heard from Devin, we have to sell these homes at market price, right? But we also have the ability to incentivize the acquisition of these properties from some of our community-based organizations. We don't want to own these assets, right?
No.
We want to get rid of these assets.
Agreed.
But there are nonprofit agencies that are really well-equipped to deliver services in a home like this. So I'll try to give you the easiest explanation of how this would work. So you set aside resources from SHS for capital investments in recovery-oriented infrastructure. You set aside $10.25 million for that. You set aside $2 million for medical respite housing. You also left unallocated $16.95 million, right, that we have available to us. So if we did something like took $10 million of SHS, helped subsidize the acquisition of these properties, made grants, capital grants available to community-based organizations to make down payments on the properties from the Housing Authority. We take that money out of one pocket and we put it in the other. We take it out of the SHS side, we put it in the pocket of the Housing Authority to use for redevelopment. So that provides the capital that the Housing Authority needs to get started on its projects. And then we could issue debt to the CBOs, or, those details can be ironed out over time, right? But we subsidize that down payment, and then we commit to the community-based organizations that will then subsequently voucher these really hard-to-house folks in these houses. So we subsidize the ongoing occupancy and ongoing program operations. And just as an example, our providers have told us that, like in a 3-bedroom house, they can house between 5 and 7 people there. So let's just say the debt on that was $3,000 a month in payment. You can very easily do the math and then see that, well, then we're talking about for each occupant, the rent is $600-700 a month, as opposed to what we're paying closer to $1,500 or $2,000 when we voucher someone in a private market unit. So not only does it bring down the unit cost of occupancy, it's also a better way to meet people's needs, yes, and it's more sustainable over time. So we're really lucky to have a lot of really smart, capable staff that are committed to ingenuity, committed to helping you achieve your goals of providing more recovery-oriented infrastructure. We think this piece is a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. We've struggled to see a downside in this, right? We see a win-win-win. It's a win for the county in terms of capacity we need. It's a win for our service providers. It brings down their cost of operations. It's a win for the Housing Authority. It gets the capital it needs to redevelop and other affordable housing options, and it preserves the asset into the future for this programmatic purpose. So that's my long-winded explanation to you about the opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's just genius, really. This presentation today has me so excited on so many different levels. Quick question, Adam, as you were talking, the rents on, they could pay $600 a month. I'm sure they qualify for income source like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or whatever that is, and they may even have their own resources, we don't know. So if a CBO was to own these properties, are they property tax exempt or not? Because that does figure into Clackamas County's general fund tax collection. Just saying. We're not paying property taxes on the, now.
Currently exempt, right?
Yeah, so I don't know if CBOs, or you can get me that answer later.
Okay.
Okay, because it really, if they have to pay property taxes on them, it's more income back into the county. Just saying. 75 homes, I like that very much. Commissioner West?
Good morning. This is exciting, thank you. It's kind of days like this where you're like, I like being a county commissioner, and I like working with local government. It's fun being with county government. Everyone should try it, it's awesome. Good job. A couple questions. I was just waiting for this moment to opine on this plan. The first presentation was fantastic, really well done. Kudos to you guys. I want to understand, because we're talking about recovery, and also often you'll hear me, I've been kind of chirping about this, is that we look at programming a lot with data. We look at helping like different services, but we don't do a good job tracking the client through the recovery process to sobriety. And I'll say it again because we don't say it enough in government, and I believe the goal is sobriety for many people that struggle with this. The state never says it, but we'll deal with that later. I want to know where these new assets, we'll call they're newish or new, where does the client fit? Where do they fit in that overall care continuum in the system of care, right? There's a couple things I've heard: medical, I've heard respite. I want to know if we're talking about spaces for those in this population that are in hospice, that people have the ability to not die alone and have the dignity to not die on our streets. So when we talk about medical respite, I want us to also start thinking about hospice care for people. That is a real population. And I want to understand the client from street-level homelessness as we're building out this big system fast. I want to know where this fits into the system and how it is filling a gap. And I don't know if you guys can speak to that. And I also want to know where it is in the recovery, that recovery process, right? Is it, we've talked about stabilization centers, that's part of the process. We've talked about detox, that's part of the process. We've talked about transitional housing, long-term. So I'm kind of trying to understand, as we're talking about all kinds of exciting new things, where is this in our goals in our process?
Yeah, and I'm going to let Vahid take this one for the most part, but I'll just say the cool part is that 75 houses presents a lot of opportunity to do different things.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's kind of all of the above. I'll let Vahid go into details.
I think thank you, Commissioner. The big picture, where this fits in our system and meets a gap therein is that long-term residential component of the recovery-oriented system of care for folks. So you mentioned stabilization center, detox. There might be, we could also think about inpatient recovery and treatment centers. When we did a lot of kind of an extended listening session with our community providers in this space about, what we're looking at potentially, utilizing some of these SHS resources to address capacity needs and gaps, where are they? And where would your organization want to go and fill those gaps? What we heard over and over again is that need for long-term residential care, that we can build out systems, and we already have them. And we're hearing from our own division, the behavioral health division and the health clinics, that we have high acuity behavioral health care programming that struggles to serve new people because there's nowhere for these folks to go next. And what they need next is not just a single, a voucher to live in an apartment on the private market. Their next step does require further care. And so this is filling that gap. This is the step after sort of acute care or short-term treatment, what our provider community calls spin dry services, that really require the next step is a longer-term placement, a place to live, housing, that depending on this would fill, this wouldn't be one type across these 75 houses. So we would be looking at a multitude of different sort of specialty housing, but some of it would be sober living, right? So that's the next step that some people need after their prior step in their process. Some would be, single-family homes with on-site clinical services for folks who still need ongoing support in they aren't there yet to where they're ready to live in an Oxford-style house. But also physical health supports, right? That's been a challenge that Adam mentioned, that our highest acuity households that are living in apartments in multifamily units in the county with vouchers, we're doing a great job. Our retention rate is 98%, so people aren't returning to homelessness. But many people are struggling with that weekly visit from their case manager when some folks need attendant care, right? Yeah. They need staff who live there who can meet their higher acuity needs. So those vary, and the intention would be with taking 75 of these homes offline and dedicating to this purpose, we can meet a lot of different needs and be creative.
Tell me how you think, two questions. One, how does this impact all of us who are stakeholders? So if you live in Clackamas County, consider yourself a stakeholder whether you know it or not. So that's just on the record for everybody who lives here. This should matter to you. How does these various sites kind of become part of community? Because recovery is about community stakeholders all helping people build recovery capital back in their lives, right? And so I want to understand how, it's easy to understand how it feels less institutional, which is good. But I want to understand the community impact and what your thoughts around that. And I want to, before I throw the other question at you, I'll let you answer that one.
I mean, in so many ways, right? There's our ability to expand so one of the really insightful remarks that I heard in that listening session that Adam and I did with our providers was, think systemically. Don't just focus on one program type and invest in it. We need all of the types. And this is the critical missing type that, OHA-funded recovery, centers can get grants and provide services in our community, but what's missing is that residential long-term next step. That's the biggest gap.
Yeah.
So this affects our community, that it gives the rest of the parts of the system a critically missing resource that they're able to then build out their capacity, so that we would be able to invest in greater expansion of capacity in treatment centers, for example, now that we have places for folks to go. There's a next step. But I mean, the larger picture that I think you're asking about is, I mean, this affects, this kind of programming will affect everyone in the community, because we all have experienced impacts of this crisis. I know people who have died of overdoses, and so do many people in this room. We all have businesses, law enforcement partners, communities that are impacted by people who are unsheltered with unaddressed behavioral health and addiction issues, who are in our community suffering, and in their process of suffering, creating conflict and chaos in the spaces where that's happening. And there's not an adequate help for those folks, and so our entire community is seeing the impacts. This is the kind of holistic systemic thinking that does impact everyone in the community, because it provides real solutions to folks who have those kinds of crises in our streets.
I just want to add, it also happens to be a really shrewd use of taxpayer resources.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I don't want that to be lost here. Not only is this the best thing to do from a programmatic perspective, it also happens to be about as financially sensible as anything we could possibly do. So our providers, a lot of these services, when we're providing really intensive supports, they're billable. But our providers struggle with some gap funding. And so that's the magic of this rent assistance voucher, is that we can sprinkle a little of these rent assistance dollars in to help them fill that gap. But otherwise, this is a self-sustaining system, because they can bill for many of those services.
Two things. One is, I'm really curious about with this plan, how many beds and what impact will those beds make in the overall need? Like, Ben, we really need in Clackamas County, I'm just gonna throw weird numbers out there, 500 beds. And this will help us get to that goal of X many beds, and for shelter, to help people get the shelter they need and living capacity. And then I'd still like, we were talking about a lot of stuff in Clackamas County, and this is broader, I think, for the staff, is I'd like to see a physical map of the web we're creating, and like how it's and where the care and where and we're in the care continuum we're building. I'd like a physical representation of all the things we do and how it is meeting our overall goals that we keep talking about. Because now we're just talking about a lot of different opportunities, recovery campuses, we've talked about that. We have a navigation center we're supporting. We just bought the health clinic, right? Like, we're doing a brand new health clinic. We are doing this. So there, I would like to get, you need to wrap your brain around, like, what is the system we are building? I'd like to see it. So that's my last of my questions and comments, and thank you. I totally support this. I hope we move forward quickly and with all the gusto necessary, and I'm really proud of you guys. Thank you.
Sure thing. And just to quickly answer your question about beds, so, it's 75 houses. We'll have to look at the composition in terms of 3 to 4 bedroom, but I think, occupancy between 4, 6, 7, depending on the services being delivered there, it's probably between 300 and 500 people that we would be able to serve,
That was
which
my
is
math right here.
huge.
I think it's important to
Just
let people
on
know
this
that.
one paragraph.
Yeah.
You say,
In the report.
between 300 to 400?
3 to 500, we'll have to see, yeah.
Okay.
Just
That's
on the
amazing.
75 scattered sites. Before I go to Commissioner Savas, I would like, can somebody do some math for me on how many, with this repurposing, just on this presentation, how many more units total we would be getting as we go forward. And you don't have to have that number now. Because, gentlemen, I want a headline. We're writing headlines today, and PGE, I'm certain, is listening. Thank you. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, hey, programmatically, this is all good. I really like what you're all saying, and it is got some genius behind it as far as maximizing these, but there is a financial reality, and I want to use that yardstick again about long-term, the housing, property aspect. So I want to use that yardstick. The other one I want to do is also paint the picture or realize what we're in today, and that is that, and I come from the business sector, but also in watching business filings and nonprofit filings and seeing ones that are active and how they die, and the failure rate of businesses and nonprofits is very similar, a very similar wave, meaning most of them fail. And a lot of nonprofits are here today and they're gone sometime in the future. And then some stand the test of time, and that's great. But we are in a bubble. We're in this opportunity bubble where we have supportive housing services that are funding, and nonprofits are creating and they're being funded. But the funding long-term, the different yardstick of long-term, short-term is that there's not a future that we can rely on, or even a lender would rely on to say, hey, this supportive housing service is going to go on in perpetuity. It may or may not. The state funding that's available, same thing. It may or may not survive the test of time. So I go back. I just want to be mindful that their success depends on funding, and if that goes away, then maybe in 10 years we've got a bigger problem on our hands. So I go back to the when Devin was up here, the concern I have about whether it's a deed restriction or a clawback, but there again, I don't want that to be a burden on the housing authority that suddenly, or the county or government, that we got to pick up all the pieces. If there's deferred maintenance, if there's other issues, other liabilities that happen. So I just want to bring that financial and property reality and funding reality into this whole equation. So I need some more confidence in what that looks like and how a nonprofit could or could not, and how we recover from that. And I know that's a difficult thing to understand and comprehend, but please be mindful, because I'm not going to take my eye off of that. And a number of things we're doing, not just this, but a number of that I'm concerned about. I'm also concerned about some of the nonprofits I've spoken to have all the great, their passion, they really care. I love that passion. I love what they do, but I don't think they have the business infrastructure underneath them to keep them operating, or maybe doing the paperwork and all the red tape that goes along with the services they provide. It's a different world, right? But you got to bring those together in order to make paycheck, make payroll, provide the services, keep the power on. So I just want to just add some emphasis on that and ask if there is a plan for, again, a clawback or a deed restriction that these properties don't fall off a cliff and they become something that's mortgaged off or sold off on the private sector. We don't have those properties for public service any longer to serve the people we intend to serve.
Yeah, and Commissioner, just we can contemplate that in the deed restriction, and what happens when let's say a nonprofit failed and that asset needs to be disposed of. Generally, when we make capital allocations, it's something to the effect of, we either get that asset back or we say dispose of it and recoup our losses. So it would be something to that effect. But we can talk about the details of those deal structures as we get more into it. We wanted to take your temperature on this as a concept today. There's certainly tons more details to iron out.
Right. And I just want to just say that not only am I concerned about the property or deferred maintenance and all those other financial obligations, but the people that are there being served could also experience that sudden loss of, hey, I'm on the street, or I don't have that service any longer. So this is something that we need to be mindful of for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this, a very good presentation. There's a lot of information in these 4 pages. We know that. We're willing, I think, to go ahead with this program as presented, knowing that we all had questions questions that you'll return with answers to. Commissioner West?
This is probably the best part of my day. I get to make a motion on some real movement that was really consequential on a high priority for this county. We are doing good things and acting with the urgency that we need to here. Chair, I would move that we approve the updated public housing repositioning plan as proposed.
I'll second that, and I just want to thank the Brown brothers for all their work, and Devin, and Rod, and everybody for doing this. And yes, Commissioner, county government is the best form of government, but I'm biased, so, too. Okay.
This
Thank you.
today.
Thank you. There's a motion. Commissioner West has moved we approve the updated public housing repositioning plan as presented, and Commissioner Schrader has seconded the motion. Further comments? I will just say you have 25 homes listed as possible home ownership. See what you can finagle around to come up with some more on that. It's very important. And like I say, I listed a couple of jurisdictions where some mayors would really like to see that in their neighborhoods. So let's just see what we can do with that. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, my comment is, you heard a lot of concerns, some concerns, a lot of good ideas, so I know the motion is very broad and high level, but everything we expressed, I presume, I want to make just a statement, get it on the record, that there'll be a response to some of these issues that have been raised. And again, kudos to everything you're doing and everyone in the audience for everything they're doing. And I'm excited by this as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. Commissioners, on the very first page, what action are you requesting from the board? In this document, it says understanding that all binding actions will be brought back to the board for review and approval, so we already have that in here. I think that is well understood. Commissioner West?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback quickly on what you said. I was on the council for Wilsonville when they made it a very specific city priority to promote first-time home ownership to deal with the housing crisis. So it is a stated, purposeful, at least within the Wilsonville jurisdiction, that this absolutely fits within their mission as a council right now.
Yep.
So I think it's great that we've already had local partners and cities pop up and say, hey, we want to work with you all with this. And I bet you there's others. But it's great that we already have a couple of our cities that have done that. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I think Wilsonville uniquely has already stated, yes, this is what we're about.
Of course, cities usually are not in the business of providing housing as much, I don't think. So for some cities, it's going to be a very hard lift. But we'll just kind of reach out and grease the tracks, so to speak, and just let them know that this is what we're thinking. And so that'd be very good. Thank you very much. Tony, please take the poll.
Commissioner Leenstra.
A very enthusiastic aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Commissioner Shull.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 6-0. Thank you, Ann Leenstra, for joining us today. Thank you, staff, for making a great presentation. Go forth
Thank
and
you.
conquer. Bye-bye. Gary, what's next?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, would you please convene as the Water Environment Services Board of Directors?
I will recess as a housing authority of Clackamas County and convene as a Water Environment Services.
You are now meeting as the Water Environment Services Board of Directors. This policy session is Water Environment Services fiscal year 2024-2025 to 2028-2029 Capital Improvement Plan. Greg Geist is the Director of Water Environment Services and Jeff Stollard is the Capital Program Manager. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Chair Smith, Commissioners. That was certainly a tough act to follow, but I hope you can tell by the number of West staff in the room that we think this is pretty exciting, too. Tony, are you going to pull up the presentation? So we're basically here to present our 5-year capital improvement plan, talk about some major projects, and how we're intending to fund the proposed plan. Next slide. So I want to emphasize, can you hear me okay? It feels echoey. That our 5-year CIP is based on thoughtful planning. Since 2017, we've done a number of master planning endeavors, everything from our stormwater system to our various facilities to our collection system, and we have a really good understanding of the condition of our infrastructure, the needs to accommodate future growth, and I think how we're going to pay for it. So I feel like we're in a very fortunate position. I also want to mention that we have taken this to our advisory committee. The chair of our advisory committee, Greg DiLoretto, is in the back. And they did.
Greg, who is the chair again?
Greg DiLoretto.
Greg DiLoretto. How do you do, sir? Welcome and thank you for coming. Go ahead, Greg.
Thank you. So they did recommend bringing this forward to the board unanimously. The other thing I wanted to mention is we're going to be talking about SDC, system development charges. About 60% of this plan, this $240 million, is to fund rehab and rehabilitation of existing facilities, not for growth. System development charges are prescribed in statute that can be used for new growth to pay for the impact to our system. So about 40% of the $240 million is growth-related dollars. Next slide. Just to give you an idea, so we do this, it's a 5-year capital improvement plan. We come back every year. And I just wanted to show you how it's changed from the last proposed. We, as you hopefully can tell from the folks in the back, we're nearly fully staffed now. Project delivery has always been a challenge for WES and for lots of other organizations. And I really feel like we're fully staffed and we can deliver these projects. And thank you. We have asked for additional engineering positions over the years and been given those, so it's coming to fruition now. We've also updated our cost estimates to reflect the recent inflationary adjustments that have been made and forecast what we expect moving forward. Next slide. A similar story with our storm system master plan, which we just completed last year. So the last time we did a capital plan for our stormwater infrastructure was prior to the completion of that master plan that told us, here's all the things that are wrong, here's what you need to do for growth, and gave us a new set of capital projects that you can see there in the green lines. Next slide. So this is kind of our flagship project right now, our outfall project. It's exciting and a little scary. Well, if you look at the dashed green line from our treatment plant in the upper right down to where it diverges with the gray line is going to be what we call open cut. So a trench, lay a pipe, pretty straightforward. From there out to the river is going to be a tunnel boring machine. And the pipe is going to be, I don't know the exact diameter of the tunnel boring machine, probably 9 feet or so. The pipe's going to be 7.5 feet in diameter. Jeff just mentioned last night, Shaquille O'Neal could stand up in this thing. It's enormous. The existing one was built in 1984. It's virtually at capacity when we have wet weather events. This new outfall will be in a much better place in the river from a water quality standpoint and will be our primary outfall. So we will maintain our existing, the gray line outfall, but only use it during those peak wet weather events. Just last night we did an online webinar for this project. We've done quite a bit of outreach to the community. We had to have a vote in Oregon City to even be able to do the project because it goes through a park. And we're going to be having a groundbreaking ceremony very soon. Jeff, do you know exactly, have we zeroed in on that?
The third week of February. So just next month, February 21st. Thank you.
And then when the tunnel boring machine arrives, we'll have another opportunity for an event. And we're also working on an idea how we're going to name it. So that could be fun. Next slide. Another highly visible project is our Clackamas Area Interceptor Program, $46 million project. Again, it has its own webpage. We've done tours with the community, particularly elected folks from Happy Valley and other interested parties, reached out to business owners, and also did a virtual webinar that's available online for that. It's going to be done in 3 phases. If you look at the upper right where the red line is, that is in what we call the Rock Creek extension. So that is not existing infrastructure today. We're essentially going from 172nd out to 190th to accommodate all that growth that Happy Valley is anticipating in that area. And again, there's actually existing constraints in the yellowish-orange line, so that will be phase 1. Next slide. Okay, Willamette Interceptor Program. We're coordinating with ODOT and with Kiewit. We've contracted with Kiewit to put a 24-inch pipe across the I-205 bridge. Our existing crossing is on the Arch Bridge in Oregon City, and we're not able to expand that. It can't be upsized because of the structural integrity of the bridge itself. We expect construction on this one in 2025-26 and completion and utilization in 26-27. As you probably know, we're also coordinating with West Lynn, who needs to put a drinking water pipe on the I-205 bridge. We're going to build our pipe first. Hopefully they'll be able to use it until their pipe gets built, and then we can connect up to it. And again, a $30.4 million project. Next slide. And I think the last time we talked up here, Commissioner Savas had some questions about kind of the collection system work, what we call cured in place plastic pipe, where we're out with our TV cameras, sending them down lines, not every day, but a lot during the year. We have a program where we grade the pipes and then put together a package, an annual package where we go out and rehabilitate. So while we are focused on these large, expensive, complex projects, we have an asset management program that's identifying things all the time that are small capital projects. So we have a budget for that, whether it's the treatment plant or if something happens at a pump station or a regular collection system. Next slide. So how are we going to pay for this? I guess I want to focus on, well, the upper right, it's a total of $240 million. Our previous adopted was 192, quite a bit more money. You'll look at if you look down at our 5-year surface water CIP, it was 9.2 million, went up to 19.8. That's because we did that storm system master planning exercise in the meantime and identified capital needs. We think we can do this. We've said this for years now, that we're shooting for 5% year-over-year rate increases to fund all that rehabilitation and all that growth. We're still there. So we're projecting 5% sewer and 5.25% surface water. I will give you an idea of what that looks like for the rate and where we're at relative to our peers, I think on the next slide. Our assumptions is 5% annual increase in operating and maintenance costs and a 1% annual population growth, which is what our most recent population study is telling us. One of the ways that we can do that is by borrowing sooner. So we have a mixture of SDCs, rates, cash, and borrowing. So we would borrow a couple years sooner, and we would go from a 25-year term to a 30-year term. And if we do that, we believe we can pay for this with that 5% year-over-year rate increase. Next slide. And if you look at where we're at now, so the average regional rate today is about $58 amongst our peers. We're proposing $53.60 for 2025. We're at $53.60. And if you look down at the surface water rates, today I think we're at $8.85. We would propose to go to $9.10. The average amongst our peers is $15 today. So we are a little more than half of what the average is. And there's a couple cities that are charging them about $30 a month for that. So
What was that, Greg? I couldn't hear you.
There are a couple cities, I think it's Milwaukee and probably Portland, that charge $30 a month, where we're charging $8.85, I believe. So we're well below market, especially those kind of outliers. So and what my point here is to show that even with those year-over-year rate increases, we're going to continue to be extremely competitive and build the infrastructure that we need to build. Next slide. So this just shows in a diagram that the relationship in our 5-year capital plan rolls into our budget. We have a long-range financial plan and a rate forecast so that we can look out into the future and make sure that we can schedule the projects, have our regular rate increases, meet our needs, and not have excessive or unpredictable rate increases over time. And then again, part of the point of this is our 5-year CIP. Every year you approve our budget. So there's always that do loop. There's stakeholder input, and ultimately you folks decide what our rates are going to be. Oh, and I would say the one wild card, having worked as a regulator before, is future regulatory requirements. We just got a couple draft permits. We theoretically should get a new permit from DEQ every 5 years. In practice, they've not achieved that frequency, so some of them are quite a bit longer than that. But when they do renew, they never get less stringent. They always get more. And right now, we just got a couple draft permits for our Hoodland and boring facilities that have some significant, I don't know if to call it an increase or a reduction, I guess a reduction of how much temperature we can discharge to the stream. So we have to work through that. But other than that, other than those kind of unknown, unknowable regulatory items, I feel like very confident that we can deliver this. Next slide. So next steps, $239 million sanitary, $19.8 million surface water. We did receive the motion to support, as I mentioned, on November 9th from our advisory committee. And then what we're asking is that you allow us to bring this back at a business meeting for a formal adoption. Happy
Thank
to
you
answer
very
any
much.
questions.
Before we go to questions, is there anybody from the advisory board or committee who would like to come up and make any comments? We have time. Now's your time. Yes. Come on up, sir, please. Anybody else can join him as well. Would you please introduce yourself?
So I'm Greg DiLoretto. I live in West Lynn. I'm also chair this year of the advisory board. I was vice chair since we started it, whenever that was. And so I've never refused an opportunity to talk, as you know. I think you really need to be proud of what West does. One of the things I do, aside from this, is I was president of the American Society of Civil Engineers, and I'm chair emeritus of their Committee on America's Infrastructure, which includes their report card that we issue every 4 years. Nationally, wastewater agencies have a grade of D+. That means they're near failing, and that has an impact on our economic prosperity and our quality of life. Now, we don't rate individual agencies, but I also travel all over the United States giving this talk, and I see what other agencies do. I've even been called in as a peer reviewer for others. And we don't have those problems. And we don't have them because of all the plans that you have seen before you today, as well as the thoughtful process of keeping our rates constant and having these kind of programs that provide for the infrastructure that we need to keep our economic prosperity and our quality of life. Once you get behind on something like this, which is really happening in the United States, it's what drove the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act. It really drove that because we just got behind. We can't afford that. So this is really an amazing piece of work that this organization does. And as its board of directors, you really got to be proud of them. They do great work. Thank you.
Thank you for that. You say your rates are constant, and they're constant because you acknowledge the fact that they have to be raised a little bit each year.
Exactly.
And then this is 5%. Now, I can name jurisdictions in Clackamas County who provide sewer and water, and they're failing because they have not raised their rates for years and years and years, and it's going to be such sticker shock for their ratepayers and their consumers when they get new systems online. It's going to be awful. And that's something that has to happen in this industry for both water and sewer. And the 5% is palatable, but you know, when you talk about other utilities, won't name any names, or other jurisdictions coming with these huge rate increases, it's really unfortunate. And I do appreciate the financial management of this. We have a couple commissioners in the queue. Commissioner Savas, you're up.
Well, Greg, it was great to see you again, Greg. We've known each other for a long time, and I think we share a passion, I think, for building things and staying on top of things. I think all your points are well taken, and I think there is indeed a lot to be proud of. I think the hat that we all kind of wear up here, which may be a little bit different at times, is just realizing the economic impacts on families and households. And so my questions and concerns are not really related to you know, what we're doing here, what's proposed in the CIP, but how it's paid for. Greg spoke to you. I appreciate the presentation and your staff support and the answers that were given. I do have a concern, and maybe we could talk a little bit more. I know we ran out of time the other day. A little bit more, if I recall correctly, please correct me if I make a mistake. I don't want to do that at all. I don't want to misrepresent what I heard. But the rates, the rates that the households are paying are on a 5% increase annually, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the SDC rates, which a majority of this is SDC driven, are, you mentioned it, on a 2% CPI?
So we make assumptions based on history moving forward, but we adjust it annually according to the actual CPI, the Engineering News Record Construction Index.
Okay. So you also mentioned that, I think in our conversation the other day, West Lynn, and I know that I don't say we have a wholesale rate on SDCs. I don't really understand that, but that West Lynn was really, really high, and I know that they build in their own factor for their own infrastructure, right, for their local collection and so forth. So what I need a better idea is that, you know, 5% household, I understand, we already have critical mass, so I understand the value of more ratepayers paying in. And on your slide number 10, where you showed the rates, I really didn't see well, it wasn't designed to, but it'd be nice to see a growth element in there. I can see the legacy debt, I can see what's being paid for, but, you know, the question is, the equity question. How much should SDCs, the growth, be charged at or billed at? I understand those are limits, and that becomes political, not real. They would be a lot higher if they were actually mathematically driven, but they're not mathematically driven. It's a compromise. But I'm just concerned about the imbalance, knowing that so much of this is growth-driven. We have critical mass, sure, we're adding on, but as we get bigger, the parts we add on annually are much smaller in scale than they were once before when we didn't have the critical mass we have today. It's all math. But can you explain to me, knowing that in this anomaly period of time we're in, where construction, concrete and steel, electrical, just going through the roof, right? Mm-hmm. It just seems like it's imbalanced right now. And I just looked at the CPI and the construction index and so forth. So is this at a fixed 2%, or is the SDC is going up and down every year based on that that construction CPI? Because it seems like the SDCs would be through the roof right now if they were really matched with construction pricing index.
It changes year to year, and it's based on the Engineering News Record. But our forecasting, what we're seeing for what we're assuming about the future, is what we've seen in the past. So, and that's where the 2% comes from.
Okay.
At what percent?
2% per year.
So do you have a chart that shows the historical SDC rate for
Sure.
West?
I'm sure we do.
Okay, I would like to see that.
Sure.
I mean, I just have a discomfort, because that's been a long issue for me. Some of you have been around who maybe heard me before about this issue, and I understand, again, the pressures from the building industry and others. Mm-hmm. But there's such significant growth taking place here, and so much of this is growth-related, that it seems to me there ought to be a better understanding to make sure that we are being as equitable as possible, especially knowing that families are experiencing, I mean, just groceries alone, And now with the energy price, the pressure on families is higher than it's ever been.
Thank you. Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. It's been a pleasure working with you and being the liaison. I hope I can continue that because I think it's one of the best boards that you've pulled together that really has revolutionized how we manage this in this county, because I've been here when things hadn't run as smoothly. The other thing I wanted to point out, besides the work you're doing with this to maintain this infrastructure, which is exceptional, is that you also do a great deal of environmental restoration work for watersheds. Could you just name a few off the top of your head?
Sure. We most recently finished our Carly property, which basically replumbed about 400 acres of the Clackamas industrial area that had no treatment at all. It was built before any kind of rules or requirements, and plumbed that into a 15-acre constructed wetland that used to be a family farm. We're very proud of that one. And now we're embarking on what we call our Three Creeks project. I've been in front of you talking, we've gotten several, well, at least 2 significant grants from Metro and from, they call it NIFWIF, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, I think.
You call them nitwit?
NIFWIF.
Nitwith, okay.
Not when they're giving us money, we don't, yeah.
Okay.
And that's going to be a significant, and just a real gem in the middle of an urban area, 90 acres, lots of water quality and habitat opportunities there. And then the next phase for that, and the next conversation I'm going to want to have is, how do we get public access to it, and who should be the caretaker of that long term? We're going to do our part for the water quality and the habitat, but it really deserves to be an amenity for the community, and that's a little outside of our scope. So that's a future conversation.
And I also hear you're doing pollination work at some of these sites too. Of course, that's my bias
Yes.
too. Yeah, okay.
And just to follow up on Commissioner Savas's comment, part of our Performance Clackamas plan, we do have a commitment in there to revisit our SDC methodology in 2025, or by 2025. I don't know if that's January 1st or December 31st, but you will be seeing that. And so that conversation about does growth pay for growth, and what are the impact on rates will be brought back to you, and we will have that conversation.
When?
Well, our commitment in our Performance Clackamas plan is by 2025.
Well, I'm hoping to get a response, at least on this question that I asked today with regards to this capital plan and the SDCs much sooner.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm talking about the policy. We are going to propose and revisit the SDC methodology, which determines right now it's $8,860 for an average single-family home. If it was a growth truly pays for growth, based on the capital plan that, our previous capital plan that SDC was based on, it would have been about $13,000 per home. Okay. And again, it's ultimately, it's a statutory thing, and what you can do is it sets a maximum SDC. You put in all your capital projects, run it through the calculation, and it spits out what your maximum SDC can be. But it's up to you folks as the governing body about what you actually want it to be. And I will just say that we already have pretty much the highest SDC in the region at $8,860. Portland is at $8,300. Gresham, $7,400. So,
And regarding SDCs, it's something that I hear from, for instance, the Building Association, the Home Builders Association. SDCs are out of sight in Clackamas County. And not because of necessarily this organization, but overall. You can't afford to build a house. And so I don't know what we do as government to rein that in. I think you're probably starting to do that here, but it's difficult, I know. Commissioner Scholl, you're up.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for that excellent briefing and your materials. I really appreciated reading over the last few days. Good morning also to everyone here from West this morning. Thank you for your professional work. I'd like to talk about Oregon Department of Environmental Quality and regulatory requirements that come without funding. as an example, now, this is not in your ballpark. This is about water supplies for Oregon communities. The Oregon Water Board last fall estimated that for Oregon communities to meet the current Oregon DEQ standards for water, it would take $111 billion in the state of Oregon to meet those standards. And communities simply can't afford that kind of money. I bring this up because we have a situation just right across the county line on the Portland Water Bureau. Portland's trying to comply with those standards at about a $2 billion project, which is going to impact our ratepayers for water in a very negative way. So I mentioned that only because I want to make sure that the West Board of Directors hears about any kind of requirements coming out of Salem DEQ that is going to be difficult for you to meet in terms of finances. Also, I had a question on the Willamette Interceptor project, $30.4 million. Does that price include the decommissioning of the pipe on the old Arch Bridge, or does that stay, and do you keep using that? You keep using it?
I believe it stays.
Okay.
It's not a decommissioned pipe. It will
Okay.
remain a resource for us. We just, the size of it, we couldn't upsize it on that bridge because of the structure of the bridge, and so we needed to find another way across the river.
But it's still working, right? Rivers aren't blowing out?
That's right.
And anytime we have a river, a crossing over a river, like, those are valuable.
Yeah.
And so,
Got it.
you know, if we needed to do some summertime work and take systems offline, we could still use it. It's not adequate
see,
for high
okay.
flows, but that's not when we would be doing work on the system. So it gives us flexibility and
Got it. Well,
resiliency.
thank you, and thank you again, everyone, for your great work.
We'll go to Commissioner Savas, and then I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah, two things. Just to close out the SDC discussion, I hear my colleagues, and I understand that delicate balance and, you know, making it affordable for people to buy homes, but I kind of made this point, but I'm going to say it a little bit differently. And I only know this because I know a lot of people that are struggling. I live in an area near CCSD1, you know, just very close to the line. And so, and also doing Meals on Wheels, and which is feeding people that don't really have enough money. It's stunning when how many of those people are in the district, and how many nice homes you see that they're struggling to hang on to. And that is the key question here, is that they're trying to maintain that. And it's a whole different dynamic for the Oak Lodge folks. It's a different district, different issue. But it bothers me nonetheless for anyone in Clackamas County that is subject to the constant pressures of trying to maintain their home that they have today. So I want to leave that there, and I'm probably going to abstain until I get the SDC information I'm looking for on this today. Just got concerns. The other thing I want to cover, and we did some of this, I appreciate that, is with the surface water, but I also want to talk about the other agency, surface water agency for the Tualatin Basin, right? Is there what activities are happening there?
It's mostly, well, maybe I'll call Ron up.
Sure.
So my understanding, it's a lower rate. Our full service, our urban rate is $8.85 a month. I'd have to look at.
I'm not looking for the rate. I'm just looking for what are we doing for improvements in that area? What's the capital plan look like? I know, Ron, when you and I met, I remember up at Mount Hood at the Welch's, I made the comment as, hey, I'm really looking forward to moving on this surface water thing. That was years back. How long ago was that, Ron? You've been here for how long?
Ron Wieringa, Deputy Director of West. I've been here 8 years now, so.
Yeah, so about 8 years ago. So I'm just
7 or 8 years
curious, knowing I'm hearing from folks out over there about, again, environmental issues, drainage issues and so forth on the surface water side.
Yeah, so the Surface Water Management Agency at Clackamas County, that district boundary is set on the Tualatin River watershed boundary. It's somewhat unique in that way. Because of that, there's a portion of that district that's in the urban growth boundary, but the majority of it is rural and outside of the boundary, and for managing our regulatory compliance needs there. When it comes to just the capital component, Commissioner, we did include in our storm system master planning an evaluation of our storm system and assets in SWIMAC, as we call it, that district. And so there are nothing that elevated to a standalone capital project, but definitely projects in our list for things like drainage and conveyance projects, small repairs. There's a lot of dry wells in that area. So we have, we have a whole program on retrofitting UICs, or dry wells, underground injection controls. So there are projects that are in SWIMAC in our master plan that will be fed into the capital plan over time. But there's nothing really standalone, as the system is pretty small and somewhat decentralized over there from a capital perspective. It's certainly part of our O&M, it's part of our ongoing programmatic surface water activities where we respond to water quality complaints and deal with pollution issues, and we still do development review, and people are constructing new facilities out there. But that's the majority of our activities in SWIMAC. And as Greg had, I think had said, we do have a different rate for SWIMAC because of the rural nature of that district. It's a lower rate than our surface water rate in the other parts of the district, the more urbanized parts, because we do less capital and O&M work. Does that answer your question?
It helps, thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners?
I'm ready to make a
Go
motion.
ahead.
Okay. I move we direct staff to bring the 5-year SIP to the future business meeting for adoption as proposed.
Seconded.
Commissioner Schrader has moved. We direct staff to bring the 5-year CIP to a future business meeting for adoption as proposed, and Commissioner Schull has seconded the motion. Any further discussion? Greg, real quick, how long will it take for the Tri-City outfall to be constructed?
I believe we're looking at 27, 28 to bring it on.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
It'll come online on 2026, at the end of
Oh.
2025, early 26.
End of 2025, early 2026.
So we're talking about a year construction.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. More than I thought, or sooner than I thought.
Me too.
Tony, please take the poll.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Abstain.
Commissioner Schull.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 4-0-1. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you, board, for coming. Appreciate your attendance. Have a good day. Gary, what's next?
Thank you. Chair, would you please reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners?
I will recess as the West Environment Services and convene as a Board of County Commissioners.
Chair, if you're okay, we'll power forward and keep going. Is that okay?
Sure, that's fine.
All right. Next, policy session is a continuation of yesterday's policy session, Measure 110 Values Statement. We did not finish that discussion, so this is a continuation. Kimberly DeSantis, Senior Policy Advisor in the Board of County Commissioners Office, will present. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Gary. Good morning, Commissioners and Chair. You basically kicked it off. We're here to continue the conversation from yesterday. I have some notes based on the comments made, but I know Commissioner Schrader wasn't here, and there was a lot more to discuss. So I'm here to listen. Mary Rumbaugh is on her way into the meeting and will be here soon, hopefully, and she'll be available for questions.
Great, thank you. Since yesterday I was able to get a copy of what the proposed action in the Oregon legislature is, we had, what?
I just whispered finally.
Oh, yeah, well, it's proposed changes, and quite frankly, some of them are good, but I think it falls way short of addressing the addiction and supply problem in Clackamas County and statewide and how we deal with it. Thank you, Kim. I'm not putting these comments directly to you. And in just in my own little analysis, in this draft statement, they want to study barriers to youth addiction, a study. They want to open up behavioral health clinics under the Oregon Health Authority. List these as a Class C misdemeanor, which is not going to do a whole lot, I don't think. And establish a deflection program, and I have no idea what that means. In this document, a press release from the Office of, let me go back a moment. The Addiction and Community Safety Response, the Joint Interim Committee on, House and Senate. They give entire paragraph on deflection program, but yet it's not defined, and who knows what that means. Some data tracking, which is fine. Funding for grants, which is fine. They can do that. And then a welfare, they want to up the welfare holds from 48 hours to 72 hours, and that's very concerning to me. If you're just going to hold them and not give them treatment, that's not defined as well. And I'm not sure what the legislature means by a welfare hold. I would imagine counties have different definitions of what are welfare hold. You can't take a person who is wholly addicted to drugs and put them in a facility for 72 hours without some type of help. And Commissioner West, maybe you can help me identify that too. And we had some robust conversation yesterday on this, and I asked to have the printed copy again. And we made some changes, but I think we are a ways off of getting this. But I would like to really open it up to discussion and just hear what the commissioners have to think on this document. Hello, Mary. You can come forward if you'd like. Mary Rumbaugh from
Behavioral health.
Yes, behavioral health. I was going to say H3S. I said, well, no, I need, thank you. Thank you from behavioral health. Commissioner West.
Thank you, Chair. I have a lot to say about this today. I'm very glad the whole board is here. I think that this is a very important moment for Clackamas County as we have positioned ourselves to be thought leaders in this space, and not just thought leaders, but in our actions, and our voice really matters and carries weight. I think we have two big questions before us first. I have piles of notes here and things that we are going to need to discuss today. But the two big questions are that we need to be clear with our staff and clear as leaders in this space. Are we a county that is going to be a full repeal county? We have the position that Measure 110 should be repealed. There's important nuances with that. Or the first question is that we must answer today is, are we a county that is a repeal, replace it, or a significant amendment, fundamental changes to, but not use the language of just full repeal? But we need to make a decision, I believe, as we are working with the legislature moving forward, and we are at the table, we are in the room, we are having the conversations, we are respected in this space, that we make a decision, and that decision may impact our voice in this space, I believe. A little nuance there I think I want to provide quickly is this is not an easy decision. Not for me. I know where I'm going to land today, but I struggle because fundamentally, like I said yesterday, Measure 110 is a pro-drug measure that added gasoline to the fire of a permissive drug culture, and it made it really easy to get high, but really hard and impossible to get treatment. At its core, in the DNA of Measure 110, I think that it is completely flawed. However, if we repeal Measure, if we're a repeal county, then we go right back to what it was before Measure 110, where the state legislature has always abdicated its role and never took responsibility, and it's not a lot better. One of the reasons that we have Measure 110 is because the state leaders in the legislature and our governors refused to prioritize behavioral health and addiction services and infrastructure in a way that's glaring compared to the rest of the nation. But it's also not it's a false choice to say that if you're full repeal, that you don't want the money that's always been there through marijuana dollars, alcohol taxes, or we'll call them send taxes as a block. That money's always been there, right? Like it isn't new money, and you can still want all the amazing treatment options board and also still be full repeal. Now politically, that's a different story because the movement and the people that really hold the levers of powers in the state, they're not wanting to talk about a repeal, right? So there's a number of reasons for that. But we can advocate, I believe, in our value statement that we're putting together, very strong language, significant structural changes that would make Measure 110 unrecognizable to what it originally was. But that's a significant fundamental change in amendments. And I think that allows us to have a better voice at the table. So that's the first questions that I believe we have to address today is what pathway do we want to take? Now, I have been with Trent in the offices. we met with, I don't know, 10 legislators, or most of them Democrats, or as many as we could, and many conversations outside of the meetings in the Capitol. There's not a lot of appetite to have a lot of conversation with any large entity that's just gonna be heels down, oppositional to them, and they find the conversation of repeal is very oppositional. That's the fact, that's the climate in which we live here in Oregon right now. And there's a lot of significant things in this document that we're talking about today that need to change, but we're on the right track, and I know we'll get into that. I'm gonna highlight a couple really quickly. Clackamas County, this first paragraph, Clackamas County believes that recovery is possible, correct, all that's correct, right? But right in that first paragraph, we need to state our goal. Something that's wrong with the state of Oregon, and I've said it, I'll say it again today, again and again, is that they don't talk about sobriety as the ultimate goal. They don't talk about the wholeness and healing of somebody through the recovery process at the end of self-sufficiency and sobriety. I think that first paragraph needs to state the goal is always sobriety. And unfortunately, in some circles in Oregon, that's a controversial statement, actually. But I think at Clackamas County, I think that is our values. I think we believe that. It's kind of vaguely within this document, but I think we need to punch it in the beginning of the document. We talk about under restore safe communities by giving law enforcement appropriate tools. This is very important. As we talk about drug courts and whatnot, I think we need to also specifically mention specialty courts funded by the state. We don't do that there, but we need to be a little more specific. Prohibit public consumption, yep, we agree with that. And here's one of the things, you might have, I mean, the staff watched me in the last AOC meeting. I about lost my mind after Senate Majority Leader Liebert, who, by the way, is a wonderful person. I have a lot of respect for her. And now you just mentioned, you just talked about a chair in the LC sitting before you. They want to talk about, they want to use euphemisms instead of actually, and look like they're solving a problem here instead of actually doing anything different. It's nothing more than a political euphemism. It's a distraction, and it's inadequate. The big phrase right now in Salem, which isn't even a real phrase, I would love for you, Mary, to speak to this, and within the public health, behavioral health, addiction, this isn't even a real thing. They want to talk about deflection. We want to deflect. It's not a fly on our forehead that we're just trying to wave off. We want this is a real crisis. We need real tools that allow us to intervene in people's lives. We need to be specific about supporting the Class A misdemeanor that allows us to stabilize individuals, to get them the treatment and care that they need, and to have a little bit more effective accountability. I believe that the county should also clearly state that our goal is not to punish. Our goal is not to be punitive. We would like to see all charges dismissed as somebody gets through the recovery process, but we want to also have compassionate intervention in people that no longer have the rational ability to make decisions for themselves any longer. The sheriffs, the DAs, Association of Counties, League of Oregon Cities, myself as a healthcare provider, are begging the legislature to have enough of a backbone to not just do weird little things that don't mean anything like a deflection, and actually do a real thing that's evidence-based. It's called diversion. And so that wordplay matters, and we need that in our document. And then as we go down to data here, Measure 1 team was so excited that they were tracking how much harm reduction they were doing. That's like where a lot of the data was pointed towards, or specific providers that they were working with, and the increase of those things. That data is useless. We want to know about somebody through the recovery process and the success to sobriety. We want to track clients. We want to track those outcomes and demand that we're accountable to them. That data piece is important. We need a vision that aligns, I wrote this on here, a vision that aligns with prevention and long-term recovery and sobriety. We need the data to talk to those things because those are our goals. It's not the state's goal because they won't state sobriety or long-term recovery as an actual goal, but it is our county's goal. And drugs must be discouraged. We must not have a permissive drug culture. We have a permissive drug culture. We have to talk about how kids aren't adults and what Measure 1 did with that. That's also congruent with one of our questions we're putting to the voters. We also, I think, need to talk about our value statement. This board constantly brings up, and we should talk about this today, that we need to be hospitable to faith-based organizations that effectively provide treatment and not be antithetical to them because they're faith-based. And there is some tension between government and faith-based organizations. Yeah. And we need to say in our value statement, Clackamas County, that if you're Catholic or culturally specific care includes faith-based. And that matters to people. Many of those organizations have fantastic outcomes. We've talked about Team Challenge, Salvation Army. There's the Catholic Charity Workers Organization. We need them too. This is recovery system cares about community. Okay, big red alarm bells happening right now. They want to take as much local control from counties away as possible. The conversation in the legislature is real about removing the local health authority from counties to be effective on the ground and decentralizing it to the state. And their argument and their catalyst to do this is Multnomah County. Now, I'm empathetic to Dr. Mirren, the commissioner out of Multnomah County, that just wrote a damning op-ed begging the governor to take over Multnomah County's health authority that Nigel Jakewith out of the Willamette Weekly just did. But that had real political impacts. Now listen, Multnomah County, I'm empathetic to Dr. Mirren. I think she's brilliant. I think I have a ton of respect for her. Multnomah County's 5 behavioral health directors in 6 years, 7 health department directors in 7 years. They have record deaths in their jail. None of this is getting better. And what really was the catalyst for this letter is a response from the winter storm. On Wednesday, freezing temperatures. This metro area is a sheet of ice, 4 inches of ice. Nobody can go anywhere. Real pretty, but very deadly and very cold. They had people actually sheltered while still in freezing temperatures, and they kicked them out of those shelters and back into freezing temperatures where they were not safe. That blew up, and we all read it in the media. We're all like, and our response we talked about was drastically different. We were completely prepared, completely ready, learned from it, but we also used that opportunity to get people into CHA. We brought in wraparound services. Mary was there. We were utilizing that storm to actually like improve lives in the long run. Multnomah County failed. But there's more news that just came out from the Oregonian. During that winter storm, there was a power outage in the juvenile center where kids that are completely vulnerable in a juvenile center and concrete cinder blocks for a long period of time lost power, and it was below freezing levels. Kids were quoted saying we were shivering and the blankets weren't working. We couldn't call our parents and our family for scheduled calls because there were no phones. The commissioners were not notified, and we contract our youth to that facility. Clackamas County was not notified that our kids that were trusted in their care were put in harm's way, and that there was an absolute, at best, a neglect of appropriate, compassionate care that is expected. The bare minimum was not met, and it is not okay. I, for one, as a sidebar, wanted Clackamas County to ask real hard questions why we were not called for help, or why they were allowed to go for that significant amount of time to freeze in that weather, and put staff in that situation also. And as if like the leaders of that county had no idea. And it's really damning that all the county workers got to go home and work from home because it was cold. But people were kicked out of shelters. Kids were freezing in detention centers, while bureaucrats were cozy as it gets, like a bug in a rug. Not okay. And our kids suffered because of their incompetence. So now it's personal to me. That all being said is a catalyst for state leaders to take local authority and control away in funding. So we have to be clear that no, counties are the local health authority, the local housing authority, and we will not be held accountable for their incompetence. You can deal with Multnomah County as a one-off. We want to see Multnomah County work, but we need to be clear about that. We have to talk about restoring the funding to programming, that the $265 million that were lost and diverted away from local governments because of Measure 110. That's the funding thing. So I've thrown a lot out there at once. I know we'll tackle it all.
We can come back to you.
Yeah, and as we go through this, but first, let's tackle, if we can, share the
Okay.
big question.
All right. I'm going to interject right here before we go to the rest of the commissioners. I feel my role as chair today to get us to a point of at least general consensus on this. And Commissioner West, you said a lot, okay? The issue of taking the local health authority away from local counties, we're going to put that on the shelf, and we're not going to deal with that in this Measure 110 statement. I'm fully prepared to write an op-ed saying don't do that, and all the thousands of reasons why Clackamas County is successful in that endeavor. And any commissioner wants to join me in that with your ideas, I already texted Emily on that. Let's just get on that right now. Secondly, I am a little bit in disagreement with something you said, just a little bit, and it's up for you guys to convince me. You said we're writing this in response to the Oregon legislature. Now, I have some problems that Clackamas County value statement, it needs to stand the test of time. If we're only doing this to respond to the Oregon legislature, just get our lobbyists in here and write down all the things that's wrong with what you're trying to do. That's not a value statement, Commissioner West, okay? There's a big difference between the two on that, okay? We all have our opinions on this. I think we're going to have trouble getting there today, and I can bring it back next week too. But you said a lot, and the statement as it exists is a little bit too wordy just for my taste, but we can get there. So the question I'm putting to you, Commissioners, do we want to write a statement to the Oregon legislature that reflects House Bill 4002, or do we want to write a value statement about Measure 110? And that may be somewhat rhetorical, but please think about that as we move forward. Commissioner Savas, you're up.
Yeah, a lot has been said and a lot of things out there, and I think the part I agree with wholly that Commissioner West stated early on was the first thing that we need to do is figure out whether we're going to advocate for a reform or repeal. But I'm going to add one in there. I think there's three, and that is, there's the repeal, which that's where I came from when this all was falling apart, so to speak, and I was seeing the negatives. I jumped on. I haven't really changed there, but since then we've talked about repeal and reform, which is another option, and then there's also the reform all by itself. Now, as I said yesterday, and I didn't, and Chair, just digress momentarily. I didn't offer any changes because I didn't know what framework we're going to begin at, because I would rewrite this differently.
That's very fair. That's very fair.
So I just want to leave the door open that I would have some language input once I understand where we all are, which makes it more powerful if all five of us are there. Doesn't have to be, but it makes it more powerful. What I said yesterday is relevant to the repeal and replace, or reform, is that what I do like about any kind of a measure that's passed by the voters is it pretty well locks it in, and I won't say it'd be tamper-proof by the legislature, because it's not, but it locks in the funding as originally intended before Measure 110 ever got out there. We all agree with that, I think. So that's what I do like about a measure-driven one versus a legislatively driven one. I am concerned, if you look at the state's history in mental behavioral health investment or disinvestment, I don't have much faith in anything that is not actually locked into a measure as far as funding or whatnot. So I agree with the recovery, respite, programming infrastructure. That's a criteria we need to have. I agree that, we need to restore the law enforcement elements as they once were, but with an option, or people can, find a way out of being incarcerated by taking a program that sees it all the way through. Unless they bail, if they bail, then they gotta, I think, frankly, go back into, some kind of a programming that protects the public and themselves in particular. And then, of course, the other issue is, again, the funding aspect. So those three things are really important. But I did ask the question when we talk about repeal, replace, what does replace look like? Is that a measure that the legislature says, you know what, we're going to put it back on there? And again, that means it'll be framed up, driven by legislative input. If it's done by a citizen group, and there's a measure out there to gather signatures, and they've got something that appeals to us, then great. But we don't have any control of that, right? So I think I want to be mindful of those three. So it leads me to believe that we ought to keep it, I agree with what Chair said, brief, short, but concise and clear. And it may be, Chair, you run the meeting here, but I just think that we ought to take a position on the three main elements that we've all seemed to list here, and that is restoring the law enforcement element, locking in the funding, and supporting or assuring the recovery, respite programming, the support, the actual needs for the people out there, whatever that looks like. So what words you want to use, but those are the three issues that I support, And I'm sure that maybe, well, I'm not sure, I assume that maybe a number of us, if not all of us, would support that, and then work from there.
Okay. I don't have any problem with that. Other commissioners want to opine. Thank you, Commissioner Savas. Commissioner Schrader, you're up.
Yeah, I actually like this as a template to start with, because I think it really outlines where we're coming from with this. And what I try to make clear to people when I talk to them about this, and whether, if it goes to the voters, I think the chances are it will get repealed. So what's going to replace it? And can we be part of that replacement process with this kind of language and this kind of information? Now, one of the things I tell people, this isn't about criminalization, because that's where they seem to get caught up. I say, no, this is about an integration of public safety, the system, with public health. And I've been here for many years, and I have seen our drug courts work wonders, and we've gone to many graduations, I think you have in the past, and that it works because it gives people the opportunity to seek treatment. I hate to say this, whether they want to or not, because again, what I hear from folks is when people have lost agency, you may not be actually always making a rational decision. And addiction is such a, your brain chemistry changes. So it isn't, to me, not about being punitive. It's about, okay, how do we meld public safety in a humane way with treatment options? And so for me, that's the overall conversation. Whether or not the legislature gets there, I don't know. I kind of worry a little bit. Both the chair and I have served in the legislature. You'll get a lot of back and forth. So I'm on the fence about whether it should be an appeal. Just go ahead and people are going to vote on it. I think it's going to go that way. Or I think that, isn't Max Williams, can I ask that question? Isn't he working on language like this?
Oh, that ship has left the port a long time ago. They're full
Really?
speed ahead. I've talked to
Oh, Max and those guys, yeah.
Max and Betsy
Okay.
Johnson. It's coming.
Okay, and I just,
Coming.
okay, so I just called Betsy the other day, and I have to get a call back to her. But how does that work into what they're pulling together? How does this work?
It doesn't.
Well,
Just a minute. But go ahead. I think that question is
Question I have.
rhetorical.
Yeah.
That's rhetorical, but I want to make sure all commissioners get an opportunity to speak and give their opinions on this. Commissioner Scholl, you're up.
Measure 110, repeal or reform. Measure 110 repealed a safe society. Measure 110 repealed safe streets. It repealed safe schools. It repealed safe families. Repealing Measure 110 will move us back towards regaining a safe society, a society in which moms and dads will once again be able to let the kids go out onto the street and play. How many moms and dads have told me, Commissioner Shull, I can no longer let my kids out. I'm worried what's going on in the streets. Repealing Measure 110 will put the teeth back in law enforcement. It will make public drug use and vagrancy that are plaguing our cities and our county once again a crime. Without the ability for law enforcement to enforce vagrancy laws and public intoxication, that is, any drug use, how long will it take for us to return to a county, cities that reflect the city of roses, okay? What so many people remember. How long will it take? If we reform Measure 110, how long will families, moms and dads have to wait before they can feel that their community is safe again? Now, even if Measure 110 is repealed, we know that we need investment to restore. We need investment in the continuum of care. We need mental health. We need addiction recovery centers. We need supportive housing to take care of people who are coming off this horrible experience of drug addiction. But we can do that. We can do these things. We can help people without having to deal with a modified Measure 110. I support the repeal of Measure 110. I think we can get money to do the things some of the other commissioners have spoken about without Measure 110 being in effect. I want to err on the side of moms and dads and that have kids in this county. And I believe that Measure 110, it needs to be swept away as a piece of bad Oregon history and replaced with law and order and true concern for humanity. Right now, Measure 110 has no concern for humanity. I see them, and we all see them on the street suffering, okay, in a condition that I attribute a large degree to because of the existence of Measure 110. Let's repeal Measure 110, let's start afresh, and let's return to a safe society. And so our sister city next door can once again be called the City of Roses. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. I am falling on the full repeal of Measure 110 as well. Now, Commissioner Savas, you mentioned 3 areas: law enforcement, funding, and recovery. Now, I made notes, and those 3 categories, every single commissioner has addressed in their comments. And we can define law enforcement as, Commissioner Scholl says, safe communities. We can find funding as the current investments we've made and the funding that Measure 110 took away from counties in form of the marijuana dollars and other funding aspects that go along with it that I'm not going to repeat because you know what they are. And then we talk about recovery and the supports for recovery, Commissioner Schrader, drug courts. Okay, that is very important to me too.
Yes.
Okay. We have housing in the supports and recovery, and we have health, and we are on that path here in Clackamas County. I do fall on repeal. All this talk, I do think it needs to be as simple can get, because there's been a lot of polling done on this in Oregon, and there's been a lot of polling done in Clackamas County that the citizens have absolutely no appetite for this. Now, if you want to link it to national politics, and I'm going to take a leap here. We've had a caucus and a primary for President of the United States. And I was very surprised because those are northern states, New Hampshire and Ohio. I was very surprised to learn what the #1 issue that on exit polling that the voters revealed. Do you guys know what that is? The #1 issue is immigration and border security. And what's happening at our border. The flow of fentanyl and all these killer drugs. And they're seeing it in New Hampshire, for crying out loud. And then when the Ohio caucus came out and they said it was a huge amount, it was 45% of the voters said that, I'm going, holy cow, they're paying attention. So when you look at that, if we want to resonate to the people whom we represent, I do think this needs to be a very narrow statement. Commissioner West and then Commissioner Savas.
Something I want to bring to the attention of this board, and Mary, I'd like you to help me speak to this. I don't know if what we did last night is normal with the Board of County Commissioners and with our Mental Health and Addiction Advisory Council, who are our partners.
Last night?
Yes, I was there as the liaison from the board. And they have a unique role for us. A room full of hardworking people with stories of overcoming addiction, their life dedicated to helping people get whole, their passion for seeing, and their pride in Clackamas and what we've done so far. It was one of the coolest meetings I felt like I've ever had in my tenure as a commissioner. I asked the members of our council that are our partners in this effort, to take a vote, the same vote we're going to take today. They all spoke to it. They shared their stories. They shared much of our concerns. There was so much overlap that was just, that we're all feeling. But I think that their voice that they spoke to yesterday to advise us matters today. And I would love your insight on what you saw happen yesterday, Mary, in that meeting.
Thank you. Again, Mary Rumbaugh, Behavioral Health Division Director. So yeah, this is the board-appointed mental health and addiction. So you appoint these individuals. They happen to be many of them in long-term recovery. It just sort of has evolved over the years, and all of them. I feel like the theme I heard, Commissioner West, was many of them found their recovery from some type of formal intervention, including prison. Yeah. Many of them speak to accountability, and many of them are in positions now helping people because of Measure 110. So I think you heard a lot of passion and compassion, and I feel like what you heard from this council is you can do both, which is an accountability pathway and immediate access to treatment, which we still do not have. And I think that they were very vulnerable with you. It was exactly what you want to see these advisory councils doing in that communication to you all. And so I'm very appreciative of the time that you spent with them and just hearing their stories. So that's what I took away. I took away people in long-term recovery. They're not saying, don't have accountability. They're actually saying that that's what got me into my recovery, but we got to balance. We've got to find a balance. And Measure 110 right now does not have that balance.
The vote was unanimous that we would take a reform pathway with significant fundamental changes to Measure 110. But there are, they realized that Measure 110 was wrought with issues, but I think the overall theme, like you said, was we need to continue to grow this and move forward. I would ask, I think a lot of what the three things you guys talk about, and we can always get in the weeds, are represented in what we just wrote and sent before you today in day 2 of looking at this draft. A lot of it's in there. Regarding, we talked about, we mentioned Class A misdemeanor specifically, the accountability of law enforcement, specialty courts. We talked about what a recovery continuum looks like. Adding a couple different things in here, what our goals specifically should be. I think we're getting close with this document. I think that there's 2 things true. One, our value statement says this is the way, and it augments even further, more detail, our resolution that we already passed. But the decision to say, like, where we're moving forward on a full repeal or some type of reform, and the solutions to the problem can be done under either one of those decisions. I think that allows us to continue to, really be present with people that are making these decisions right now to advocate for these specific things. It is going to be. I think the reality is, whether we like it or not, to go full repeal sends a message of not moving forward and fixing and getting people the care they need. That's just the perception of where we're at. So I'm concerned about that. And so I'm going to support, in my gut, I literally hate Measure 110, and I do, repeal is, I get it. But because I have to legislate and move and get things done and solve problems, I'm going to ask the board to really consider maybe being nuanced and strong in our statements and policy solutions, but amicable in our ability to work with other electeds through a reform process.
2 more commissioners, and then I'm going to make just a real quick recommendation on possibly a break. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, a break would be good. I'm hungry.
Okay.
So, but I'm willing to work here. So I got my sleeves rolled up here. I'm gonna take a bold move here, and if it, I can pull the motion back if it's not going anywhere. I don't want to belabor the issue, but I'm gonna tell you what my motion is, basically, before I make it, and that is, I'm going to keep it really simple, and our staff can actually craft what they've heard following these two basic principles. Principle number one, we support repealing Measure 110. That's one thing I want to stay in here. And the county, where it says Clackamas County, on this measure here, where this line here, where it says Clackamas County supports reforming Measure 110, I would make a motion that would say that we provide language that Clackamas County supports replacing Measure 110 with legislation or measures that XXX that get to our fundamentals. But I'm not going to list those fundamentals, but I could. So, but I don't want to get ahead of Commissioner Schrader or anyone else. But if that sounds reasonable, I think we can move this along and get some traction.
We're going to have more discussion. Thank you, but I appreciate your effort. I'm not saying no to that. Okay, Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, I like your idea, because my concern is you can repeal, but we do have to have a template that makes a significant difference, so counties can have a template, because we should be the local authorities on this, because we're on the ground, and giving it to the state would be a total nightmare mess, in my humble opinion. So I would be willing maybe to have more discussion, and I think you're saying, I'm not against repeal, but we have to have something in place that makes sense, and something that counties drive, because we're the ones that are dealing with this. And I also think what Commissioner West said about our advisory group is very compelling. And I'm going to tell, I don't want to belabor this, but I had a situation with a young man. I have lots of kids who have stayed with me through the years. It turned out that he had an opioid addiction, and he stole irreplaceable things from my family, and I knew something was wrong. And the only way to get him into rehab was to get him prosecuted. And I didn't want to do that. I hated doing that. But it was the only way he would get, because he was not going to go there otherwise. So that's just my personal experience. Not that it means anything, but that's how I see it. So, thank you.
These recovery groups, I would think if you had 100 recovery groups, 100 would say exactly what Commissioner West said. I'm not discounting them, but did they ever talk about the access to drugs, how readily available they were? No, I didn't hear that. I didn't.
They absolutely talked about the
So
horror.
what did they think about? See, we have to address that. And so the problem, the main premise behind Measure 110 is it legalized the most deadliest drugs in Oregon, and we're the only state that did that.
They agreed.
Okay, but for us to have a statement that says, oh, we're not concerned about the legalization, I can't go there.
But our statement doesn't say that, Chair.
Just a moment. I did not interrupt you, Mr. West. Okay, that's why we're going to take a break. Gary, we're going to have lunch and come back in a half hour. Thank you very much. We are back. Thank you very much. We're going to continue our discussion on Measure 110. I'm going to make just a really generalized recommendation. We all feel very passionate about this, and we have really deep opinions on it, and none of us are wrong, okay? But in order for us to get one statement that's going to satisfy everybody, I suggest that we address this 2024 session of the Oregon Legislature. And Ben, you are right in that, okay? I have three just really broad statements that I'm just going to throw out there, and it can fit everybody. One, well, it starts out, Clackamas County urges the legislature to focus on three priorities. One, restore law enforcement tools for safe communities. Two, commit statewide funding for recovery programs and service. And three, prevention. Now, we all have just a moment.
Yeah.
We all have something that can fit in that. We all can add a little bit. But I think this will enable anybody on this board who wants to go down to the legislature and say, I think this. And it does not hammer ability if Commissioner Scholl wants to go down to the legislature and testify, says full repeal. It does not hammer anybody's ability. For instance,
Yeah, no,
Martha,
no,
if
no.
you want to say, yeah, but we should,
We have to have some kind of
reform it
template.
and keep these programs. So it's an all-encompassing statement. I'm just throwing that out there. We don't necessarily need, I don't think, a full-pledged value statement on Measure 110 because I don't think we're going to get there. And if we go too far with it, I believe it could cause some dissension between some of our members. I just don't want it to be there. I want us to be together on this. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, well, I'm slightly worried that if we leave it open to interpretation, especially on the first one about law enforcement, if we leave it open to interpretation, I think that we may not get what we want. And I think having some, I won't say any great level of detail, I don't think we need pages and pages, but I think, and I agree that brief, less is more to some degree, but very specific. And I don't think we should wordsmith it today either, so let me just put that out there. I don't think, but I think we can give guidance to our staff based on what we come up with. But I do think that whether we lobby for it or our staff, or in this case Trent, go into Salem and lobby for what it is, I think if it's so vague, I'm not sure, again, it's clear enough on some of these that, and so that's why I'm reluctant just to simplify it that much. I'm not saying that we need a statement per se. I don't necessarily think that I'm wedded to a statement, but I think a position, a little bit more detailed position is clear, and whether that is done in a values document like this. But I think we can get if we had half the words that are on this piece of paper, this draft, that'd be okay with me. But that's Paul. I'll leave it
Thank
there.
you. When I used the word restore law enforcement, so Measure 110 took away the law enforcement tools for the legalization, so the word restore is, to me, really not that vague. Who's next?
That's a Christmas tree pick.
It is. Okay, Commissioner Schrader, I'll just go down the line.
Let me hear what everybody else has to say with this. I'd like to get something done today. The only question I had with one of your pieces is that we should have county,
County
about getting the dollars. I mean, you said something here. What is it?
commit statewide funding for recovery programs and services.
Specific to counties or something like that. For
To the counties?
For counties, yeah.
Okay.
Because I don't want them to take away, because that'll be a nightmare. So that would be a suggestion with that, but I'm not sure where everybody else
Okay,
is.
I'm just
on
throwing
this.
stuff out there. I'm
Okay,
just throwing stuff
great.
out there.
All right, so that's.
Commissioner West?
In principle, Chair, I agree. I think in the draft before you, and for a couple of weeks of work was put into this by staff, and I had a lot of input into it. I have more input into it, as you can see scribbled on my paper. The first, after we kind of get towards a more broad policy statement and goal statement at the top, it goes, the first thing is restoring communities to law enforcement, and then there's specific bullet points on what that means. We can't be too broad because the legislature is already using the euphemism of deflect, which is a Class C misdemeanor, and it is not the tool we need, but they're going to say that that is restoring law enforcement, and it is objectively not. And I've seen, so I think that we have some of these broad statements in front of us. We have more clear definitions about like what a recovery system of care looks like, or a full care continuum. And then we also talk about the overall culture that impacts these policies. All politics is downstream from culture. It impacts it. So when we talk about those worldviews that inform policies, we do that at the bottom there. I'd like to know if the board is in structure and in where we're at with this draft. Are we, in the work that went into it, do we want to scrap it? Are we saying we're 90% there, we're 80% there? We all kind of add little notes, but for the last couple weeks, opportunity has been provided to participate in this draft, to beyond today's meeting. So I would hope that we can work off of this and then the stated questions that we had at the beginning of the meeting.
Commissioner Scholl.
Chair Smith, your idea on modifying the statement we're looking at here, I don't think it presents the board's feelings either for reform or for repeal. It, as I think, just possibly too generic. But one thing for sure, I won't support any document that states or implies support for reforming Measure 110. I'd, again, prefer to see something in this about a firm stand regarding the repeal of Measure 110. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was done on purpose, because this board is split on full repeal and reform. And Commissioner Scholl, it was intended to be that way, to get support.
I understand.
Okay. And I do think the current document, good intentioned, is way too long and way too wordy. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just take a stab at my motion and see where that goes. You know, if you have any edits or changes, I'm open. So
I'm going to write down as you talk.
Okay. I suggest that we come out with number one. I'll start fresh here. Clackamas County supports repeal of Measure 110. Clackamas County supports replacing 110 with legislation that supports recovery and treatment, number one. Number two, supports funding for all the services, and also restores law enforcement and strengthens law enforcement.
Restores law enforcement?
Restores law enforcement. I'll just leave it there, and we can edit that. But and then I think we can, if we can adopt that, okay, then we can add some clarifications below it at a later date soon.
Okay, I'm going to read this back to you
Okay.
and see if I got it right. Clackamas County supports repeal of Measure 110. Clackamas County supports replacing Measure 110 with legislation that supports recovery, treatment, and funding, and restores law enforcement. And that's not bad.
I would, if
I'm
that's.
going to read that again. Do you mind?
Okay.
Okay. Clackamas County supports the repeal of Measure 110. We support replacing Measure 110 with legislation that supports, or redundant supports, that supports recovery, treatment, and funding, and restores law enforcement. Yeah, Ben, go ahead.
Is that a thesis statement to the overall document? Or is that broad categories going backwards from the draft that we have in front of us?
It doesn't go backwards. It's more of a preamble.
Okay, so it's like a thesis to the document.
yeah.
I would like, is this a motion that's actually been made yet?
No, it's not.
Okay.
We're not,
I
look,
think
we're way far away from motions.
just to be consistent, like when we say recovery, we need to say recovery-oriented system of care, specifically within that preamble. And I think we can tighten that language to be a little bit more specific, policy-wise, a little more technical, but I don't have an overall problem with that preamble. If that gets the board kind of moving forward on an opening statement, I do believe our preamble must speak to, and I said this earlier, the goal is always sobriety, because that's what we can measure, that's measurable. And through, and the bad data that we've been getting and the lack of ability to track what's going on in the state, somewhere in our preamble, which is a little different than like what we have here in front of us, I think could kind of maybe slip in some language around, being patient-centered I think is important, or client-specific, and also sobriety within there too for those long-term recovery goals.
Yeah, I think I support what you're saying about sobriety, and I don't, and I guess maybe I'll just ask a question, whoever wants to answer it, and that is, having the preamble as the motion states, should not preclude us from listing, whether it's goals or some specifics, recovery, or that language. But the preamble being broad and then getting to a little bit of specifics. I think there's a lot here to read. And I think that if we want to be effective, less is more.
But I will say with the sobriety thing, in its DNA, like I said before, Measure 110 is about a permissive drug culture, and it is pro-drug. It's not about sobriety.
That's why we support
Right? So
repealing
when
it.
we want to talk,
That's why we support repealing it.
right, right. But when we want to talk about a preamble and we're going in a different policy direction, that is a sobriety direction that we don't get with 110. So that's why within the preamble, as a bigger, larger, overarching statement, we must talk about sobriety in it. I guess that's why I think that that's important.
So if we stay with the original preamble that Commissioner Savas did, and I like, we can have 3 bullet points after the preamble. It goes to sobriety. It goes to oriented systems of care. And those need to be very brief.
Yeah, I mean, you make a goal on law enforcement, you can make a goal on sobriety, you can make a goal on long-term funding. Those could be 3 relative goals, and then and maybe that's enough.
I think that's enough because if you start saying sobriety, well, of course this gets to sobriety. What else is it? What other reason you're doing it for? You don't even need to say the word sobriety, okay? You don't need to. But I will say in this very short session, these legislators are going to be slammed. And if we bring in this big, long position paper that's really wordy, it's probably gonna end up in the round file. Oh, here's Clackamas County again, you know, boom, bing, bing, bing. I think less is more for this session. And then let's see what the vote happens. We can't get contrary on a possible vote that we would support, okay? If the legislature doesn't come close to anything that we do, we can't put ourselves in a position that we're not going to support a possible vote. I don't know what that vote is going to be. I've not seen the language, but what I think it's going to be repeal Measure 110, but keep the treatment going, and the dollars going for treatment is what I think it's going to be. It's just my guess, okay? Is that full repeal? Well, you know, you can go back and forth on that. So I do think we have to be careful. We can't be so focused on this particular session that we forget what's down the road from us, because there may not be success at this particular session. Martha,
Oh, is it okay?
you're next.
I know. Well, I'm trying to get us somewhere with this. I don't have an issue with repeal language, but I do think that we have to have a game plan. The problem is, if we do use repeal language, it will make us more difficult for us to influence the legislature. And what you're saying is, well, oh well, if people vote to repeal it, that's not going to matter. But I do see a lot of these bullet points as appropriate talking points that gives us the template that we think needs to happen from our framework as a county. So should we just shorten it? Okay, as what Paul has suggested, and then keep these talking points, because if we're going to go and say, yeah, let's repeal, we should be coming up, and kind of frame it as, this is the plan that will work for counties. Well, is that going to keep us away from, are the legislators just going to be hairy scary, or would we have the chops to be able to still get in with them, even if it's a short session or a long session, I don't care, to say this is what works. Would that be helpful?
We could discuss that after this motion's made about what those goals or talking points are, those key points. You know, I'm just trying to get the framework set, and then we can work below, take the next step. So I don't intend on stopping here. And I think, like, for example, that last one, change the culture of drug use. I think maybe adding the sobriety thing that Commissioner West is talking about right there. I don't want to change the culture. I want to see people. I want to see sobriety.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, illegal drug use or illicit drug use is not acceptable. Period. I mean, it's not healthy for people.
It's always dangerous.
Yeah.
So just overall purpose of the document is not just for the legislature.
Okay.
It gives direction to the staff. It goes back to all of the robust work that we've done on the website where the citizens of Clackamas County and across the region can see our thoughtfulness and specific policy positions. It is a clear leadership statement that will impact AOC because of just the voice we have in the room that's going on right now. And then it's in alignment with the more robust policy statements that we're seeing from the sheriff, from the DA, from the League of Oregon Cities, from AOC, and is arguably one of the leading voices in the state as a county on this. We're starting to show that same type of thoughtful and mindfulness as we move forward. So it is a leadership statement and a direction overall, which we can voice not just in the legislature. Mary can carry this out with her partners. Rod can carry this out. All of Gary's team, all of our policy will have much more clear direction. They can speak to the need of a Class A misdemeanor. They can speak to funding specialty courts and all these specific things. I don't know if any of us disagree with anything that's been said within this sheet of paper. And I know we want to get closer there. I in my gut am interested in being specific and more robust than brief.
Okay, so you have made mention of that statement from the League of Oregon Cities and the DA and the police and sheriff. Why don't we just adopt that?
Because I think we're a unique enough leader and powerful voice with a
Okay.
consequence that we should have our own
Okay.
unique statement.
Okay. Commissioner West, I've been trying to be tactful. You do not have 3 votes to adopt that statement today. Okay? Now, we can leave at a stalemate, and I can recess, and we can go on to the next topic. Or we can come up with a starting statement that we see in writing, and then we add bullet points at the end. Commissioner Shaw.
And then we add bullet points at the end at another day, not today, correct?
At the when?
Another day, not today.
No,
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
thinking Tuesday, the next time we meet.
Okay, good.
To also
Yeah.
be tactful and fair, this has been out for a couple weeks with everybody's input asked for it. This is the most conversation we've had about it, but this is not new. We have been asking for input for weeks. I know I wrote it up a bunch. I hope you guys also did. I don't know, some things are given and taken in, but we have already done this. I had this opportunity.
Commissioner West,
So
I appreciate, you next. I appreciate your work on this, but please, don't take this as an insult of the work that you did on this, okay? We all write up stuff that doesn't sometimes see the light of day, but I have been thinking about this a lot. And I was very leery, as the chair of this commission, taking a whole hard position when I know there was this statement, and I know Commissioner Scholl thinks one thing, and I know Commissioner Schrader thinks another thing. So please don't take it as a slight against you. Scholl.
Yeah, Chair Smith, the last rendition of Commissioner Savas's motion that you read, if you're ready for to
Okay, can I
that
read it again?
I will second it.
Okay, can I read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Clackamas County supports repeal of Measure 110. Clackamas County supports replacing Measure 110 legislation, yes, that supports recovery, treatment, and funding, and restores law enforcement.
Seconded.
That was Paul's motion?
Yeah, and we can, yeah, it's my motion, and we can wordsmith it, or let staff wordsmith it a little bit as needed. I'm okay with that. I just want to get that principle, and I think that Commissioner West inputs here and ideas here can be added in to put some meat on the bones.
Okay.
But I just want to get that framework set, and that we got that position. I think we can draw it up afterwards. So.
Okay, so, and Commissioner Scholl has seconded it. So if this passes today, I'm going to instruct staff and get it in a written form for us, and then send it out to commissioners. And if any of us want to add bullet points, write down your bullet points, and we'll bring it back on Tuesday. Okay?
Yes.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I just want to say, I can get there today, but frankly, I like all the bullet points that are here already because it gives us So, and say the motion one more time, please, Commissioner Savas. Or say the motion one more
Chair
time.
has it.
Clackamas County supports the repeal of Measure 110 legislations. Clackamas County supports replacing 110 at the legislature that supports recovery, treatment, and funding, and restores law enforcement. You know, there's a word in there for each one of us. Seriously, commissioners. So there's a motion on the table, and I'm going to call for a vote. It either passes or fails. Tony?
Commissioner Schrader.
Oh, I knew I was going to be first.
You want to go last?
Yeah, I'd rather go last.
Commissioner Schrader's going to vote last. Start with Commissioner Shaw.
Aye. Go ahead.
Commissioner Scholl recorded as an aye.
Aye, thank you.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye to the preamble.
Yes. The motion on the table, yeah.
Commissioner Schrader.
And I like all these talking points. They make sense to me.
Okay, we don't qualify our votes, commissioners. It's either aye or a no.
It's an aye.
It's an aye. You just live with it. And
Chair Smith.
aye, motion passes 5-0. Staff, do you have direction?
Yes, we do, Chair, thank you.
Okay, I have it written down here, and I think Paul does too, if there's any questions. Thank you very much, commissioners. This was very hard. I do appreciate all the work that Kim, you have done, and Mary and Commissioner West on this statement. But Martha and I were both in the legislature, and I served in many, many special sessions. And let me tell you, it is hairy, and it is fast, and if we can get them to at least read this, we might have a chance. I seriously doubt they're going to listen to anything we have to say, but at least we're going to try. Thank you very much. Gary, what's next?
Chair, can I just say one thing?
Yes.
Yeah, and that is, I just wanted to say, there's nothing that Commissioner West has stated here today that I disagree with.
No, me either.
And I just think that we can clean this up a little bit. I think change the culture, as I mentioned, is maybe that's not strong, but all said, I really think we can get where Commissioner West wants to go. And if 7 days helps us get a better product that we can all agree on, there's strength in all 5 commissioners supporting it. So I want to just thank Commissioner West for his work.
Absolutely. Thank you. Gary.
All right, we are now returning to administrator issues and updates from yesterday, continuing the list. We are at board committee assignments. Kimberly, come on back. Board committee assignments. So commissioners, each January, we review your official committee assignments. These are committees that's required to have at least 1 or 2 county commissioners. Excuse me, we just want to revisit the list, see if you want to make any changes. Excuse me, there's a memo.
Where's the memo?
There is a memo in your packet.
Go ahead, Kimberly will
Commissioners.
present. Go ahead, Kimberly, thank you.
Do we have a memo?
Thank you. The memo is in the issues packet from yesterday,
Okay.
and you should have a spreadsheet, a nice colored spreadsheet in there that shows all of the committee assignments as they were last year. And so we're going to just go through the list pretty quickly and reaffirm everybody's commitment to their committees. And if you want to revisit one, please do so at that time.
Okay.
Is that acceptable, Chair?
I am looking for the list.
All right, it's on yesterday, administrator issues
but-
updates.
I understand that, Gary, but the computer is not taking us to yesterday.
I got to look under the past issues.
Let me get
Administrator Schmidt, could you have
There
somebody
we go,
bring
just a
in
moment.
a hard copy?
Would you like copies, commissioners?
Well, so Gary, it goes to January 23, but when you press on the January 23, this is what pops up, January 24, continued, and there's nothing there.
It popped, well, I have it open. It opened for me.
All right.
All right, we'll pause just a moment.
I use paper.
I had paper somewhere.
Class.
I do too.
I can scribble.
Okay, Tony, help me out here, buddy.
Absolutely.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, first up on the list is JPAC, Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation. The primary is Commissioner Savas. The alternate at this time is Commissioner West. Not hearing any objections. If you'd like, I could just keep going.
No comprende. Oh, I see.
It's all right. Facilitate everyone.
Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you. Gracias. You got a thumbs up?
Yeah, do we want to do like a thumbs
Thumbs
up
up.
if you're still good with your committee assignments, or?
We
or
are
just
reading,
incorrect?
Kim, and you're a little bit ahead of us,
Sorry.
okay?
My
You know, we're
apologies.
we're switching hats. We're
Okay.
trying to wrap our minds around the next topic,
And
okay?
technology issues too, I'm sorry.
Okay, and what did you just ask us?
I was asking about JPACT, the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on
Okay.
Transportation.
Don't we have Commissioner Savas as a primary and the alternate is West.
Correct.
Commissioner West, do you want to serve as the alternate?
I will continue to.
Yeah, Commissioner Savas, do you want to continue?
Yeah, just to make it easy, I'm okay with all of my assignments.
Well, okay, then let's go through it commissioner at a time. Commissioner Savas is on JPAC, R1 Act, NCPRD, TriMet Statewide Improvement Plan and Regional Tolling Advisory. Now, on some of these do not have an alternate on there. Is an alternate needed, for instance, on,
Some of these committees don't have alternate.
I know.
Yeah, allow them.
How come they don't have alternates?
Some of these are called out specifically for like the chair and co-chair. I'm thinking audit committee, for example, so that alternate committee, alternate position is actually the co-chair, but I wanted to call it out specifically as assigned to the co-chair. Some of them, for example, North Clackamas Parks and Rec District Liaison, that's something specific to Commissioner Savas at this time, and that's not a liaison, or that's not a position for an alternate.
Okay. Commissioner Scholl?
Yes, Kimberly, for Commissioner Savas's duties, I don't see his recent appointment to the Sunrise Gateway Corridor Project. That should be on here too.
I will add that, thank you.
And may I add, if there's a need for an alternate on that assignment, I would like to volunteer for that.
Is there an alternate on that position?
I do not know, I will look into that.
All right, so make a note that if there is an alternate, Commissioner Scholl would like to serve.
I have that noted, thank you.
Okay.
So
What, Martha?
I just assume keep all of my current assignments as well. The only one I have to check with Caroline about is the RDPO, Regional Disaster Preparedness. Evidently, that conflicts with my tribal affiliation with the Grand Ronde. And I don't know if that's consistent or not, or if they change the day. So that has to be looked into, so I'll keep it for now, but I may have to offer it up to somebody else.
Why don't you look into that and we can revisit that?
Okay. But everything else, workforce and water environment.
Okay? You're okay with those?
Yep.
So let's drop down to Scholl.
Okay, Chair Smith, mine look fine, but there's one that's missing. I believe that we should have a board member, council of forest trust land counties.
Oh, okay.
Added,
That should be-
added to this.
Who wants to do that?
Well, I'm currently that, Chair
You mean
Smith.
it's just not on the list? Is that what you're telling us?
Yeah, it's just not here. It
Okay,
should be
so-
here. It should be here.
Yeah, okay, we'll add that to the list, no problem.
That's fine. Thank
Okay, Commissioner West.
Rick Scholl has some eagle eyes. He's trying to- I'm curious if how does being vice chair now impact committee assignments? Do I fill in for Chair Smith if she's incapable of like going to some of these or has something where she can't do it? Is there any vice chair alternate type of things? I'm just curious. I just didn't know.
You were listed in the audit committee, vice chair in the audit committee.
And the internal audit
and the
oversight.
Internal Audit Committee as vice chair.
Okay. Those are the two.
Those are the two.
Okay.
And then if I am unable to attend the meetings or run the meetings, and then you step in.
Got it.
Okay. Is there anything else, West, hang on, Local Public Safety Coordinating Council? I'm
I'm
sick?
Yeah, I'm fine with all of my assignments and the couple that I got added to
C4.
here as being vice chair.
Okay.
And
Those are Zoom meetings, those audit committee meetings are Zoom meetings, so they're pretty easy to attend if you're,
Yeah, there's been a couple recent changes now on the board of directors of AOC, the vice chair ones for those Zoom meetings. I'm fine with all of these.
and that's the beauty of our staff, they can coordinate our schedules.
Yes.
Right, and try to
Yes.
schedule the audit committees. Okay, going to the chair positions. These are mainly prescribed, Supported Housing Services Oversight Committee, Tri-County Planning Body, Willamette Falls Locks Authority, Audit Committee, Internal Audit Committee, Hospital Facilities Authority Board for Willamette Falls. There we go.
So Chair, you were on, I believe, and I don't see it listed, the airport.
Yeah, the State Aviation Board, and it's not, and right, I did get an invitation.
I was talking about the Aurora Airport.
Aurora,
Yeah, the Aurora Airport Committee. Is that still going on, or?
Sometimes.
Okay.
We could list that. There is a new state director, aviation director, and I think they're still learning the ropes on what to do with that.
Yeah, I don't know if that has an alternate position, but if you're unable to, just be mindful if anyone's interested. I'm not per se interested, but if there is an alternate thing and there's no one interested, I do that, but I definitely yield to anyone else that's interested in either the primary or the secondary.
Okay. But, yeah, just put the Aurora Aviation Board. I'm not sure that's the exact title.
Yeah, that's not the name of it. I forgot what it
It's not the
is.
exact title. It's the Aviation Board, something committee.
I thought it was specific to the Aurora Airport
It is,
deal.
the
Yeah,
Aurora's, and I don't remember the name right now.
whatever that committee is.
Anything else? Commissioner West, your light is on.
Oh, I have nothing to say right now.
Oh, okay, good, all right. Kim, are you okay?
I have my direction. Thank you, Chair.
What?
I have direction. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
So we're just adding some missing items, otherwise there's no changes.
I think so.
Okay, you got it.
Well, let me check with the RDP. I really like disaster management, but
That's on the queue to check with Martha.
I know we got to do that, so.
Gary, what's next?
All right, next, evening business meetings. I will lead this up. The question is simply commissioners wanting to reaffirm, do you want to continue to hold a monthly evening business meeting at 6 p.m., or would you like to make a change? The reason I ask, or to bring it to your attention, as you know, you've had no one attend at least your last 2 evening business meetings from the public. And for that matter, no one's attended your daytime meetings either. And it's probably cyclical. There's not a topic that is getting the audience's attention right now. And that will change. For history, your most attended evening business meeting, as far as people testifying, was in February. 82 people testified at an evening business meeting on Project Turnkey. For a daytime business meeting, those who testified, and this is calendar year 2023, the highest was 33 people during a daytime business meeting, which was also for Project Turnkey. So that was topic-driven. You've got a lot of people coming to give you their input on that topic. So I'm simply asking the question, would you like to continue evening business meetings, or would you like to make a change?
Commissioner Schrader and then Scholl.
Yeah, I'd like to be more flexible with this. It's not because I don't want the public to attend, but I have to be honest. Night meetings, once a month, if we don't have high attendance, I would suggest a couple of compromises, maybe we do one a quarter, or we leave the judgment to the chair. I did this back when I was with, when I was chair, when I was with Bill Kennemer and Larry Soa. We had a huge issue with a whole bunch of school people. Forget what the issue was, but they asked for a night meeting, and I thought Bill was going to have a heart attack, because at the time, he didn't do any night meetings. And I said, yeah, we can do one night meeting. So I'm wondering if we should just leave it up to the discretion of this commission with consultation with the chair, that if we know we're going to have a big hot topic, we can say, okay, this one we're going to do a night meeting because we know that we have a lot of people that want to come and testify for it. So I'm just seeing it as more of a compromise. I have to admit, when I get home at night, I'm home at night. You know, it's whatever. So I don't know what anybody else thinks, but compromise might be possible here. So.
Commissioner Scholl?
Yes, as I recall, before we went back to one evening meeting per month, we did get a lot of comments from people saying, hey, what happened at the evening meetings? But when we have an evening meeting and no one from the public comes to testify or sit in on the meetings, that means that we're using man-hours late into the evening that aren't really needed. So I'm wondering if Commissioner Schrader's idea to go to a pre-planned evening meeting once per quarter, like the first month of the quarter, and then if we have something that comes up that's generating a great deal of public interest, we could, at the beginning of that month, state to the public that we'll have an evening meeting on, that one Thursday night, or what, second Thursday of the...
Currently, yes.
Okay. So I think that'd be a good idea, because that would be more concerned about manpower and efficiency.
Thank you. Commissioner Savis?
Yeah, well, I just want to make sure whatever metric we're basing this topic on is based on something that applies to everything, and I'd be concerned about using attendance of the public as a metric, because as Gary outlined, we have daily Thursday business meetings where no one shows up, right? Last meeting was an example of that. So I'm reluctant there. The other thing too, and I kind of relate this in a number of ways in just my 25 years of public service, and that is that consistency, people knowing that you're there, so when they do want to show up, it's a continuous, consistent time, and so I think that's important. The other thing is that daylight savings versus not. It might be later in the day, but maybe the sun's still out when we go home. So, it is seasonal to that degree, and maybe there's a way to accommodate any issues with night driving. If that's the case, I'm happy to help with that. The other thing too is that what I also remember from over several commissions, when the idea of maybe taking it away or doing it, there was, even prior to Commissioner Scholl being here, there was pushback on that. It was a take. They considered it a take. And I don't think right now in this particular time that it would be well received, and I would just be worried about some backlash. But I think it's at least consistent for us to, number one, recognize this principle, which is why it's here to begin with, is that most people are out there, not all, most people are out there, work every day. And they're at work right now. And their ability to access us, and we've seen many examples of that, even in the last 3 years here, where people showed up that will otherwise never show up in the daytime, but they have that evening as an opportunity to bring something that just popped up for them to come speak to us. And that's been utilized before. So I would just advise and like to see, I know it's painful, but we're well compensated for what we do, and I think that having us accessible and not rolling that back at this particular time is the smartest thing we can do. That's my opinion.
Commissioner West?
When I was campaigning for the seat and running to be a county commissioner, I did hear frequently that people missed and wanted, because at that time there weren't evening meetings for a session, for a season. Many people, mostly people that are working people during the day, felt disconnected from their local government. I think we're unique in the sense that we're the government closest to the people that impacts our lives the most, so even the perception of accessibility is worth it, even if nobody shows up. That perception matters, and perception is reality in our business, as we all know. Evening meetings aren't the, necessarily for our benefit by any means, but it is for their benefit, the people that we serve. So I would support continuing the evening meetings as we have them. I don't really have an appetite to change it personally, and I want that perception of access to the local officials to remain.
Thank you, Commissioners. We're probably the only governing body that meets on a weekly basis where the public can come and talk to us, really at any time. We get phone calls and we get emails, and with the advent of more technology, they can watch us at any time of the day on YouTube.
They can watch us.
And seldom do we have people in the audience who come to watch who testify. They can always watch us on YouTube. I brought this forward for a discussion, and Gary and I were talking about it. It is, I think, a staff issue. And as you've noticed, we have less staff people at the county administration level to do some of this work. I am concerned about it. I kind of like Martha's idea of, as an ad-needed basis, if there's a hot topic and people want to come, I'm certainly flexible with that. Is there any appetite for that?
I would make a motion to that effect because again, another piece of history, one of the reasons why my previous colleagues were leery of night meetings was because of the staff overtime.
Mm-hmm.
That was an issue at the time. I don't think it's gone away, but also I don't really feel like we'll be excluding people if we have that option available as needed at all. And I think that any one of us can request, hey, we think this is an issue, and talk to the chair and say, I think we need to have a night meeting on this one because it's a hot topic. And for me, at least if we tried that, we can see how it goes. And if people think it's a take, then call me. And then we'll revisit it again. So I don't know how to make this motion, but I'm going to move that we have night meetings as necessary, as determined by a consensus of the board.
For a particular topic.
For a particular topic. And if there's a second?
As of 1 February 2024?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that a second, Schul?
Second.
Okay.
Okay.
Commissioner Schrader has moved we hold night meetings as from a consensus of the board based on a hot topic, on call, starting February 1st, and Commissioner Schul has seconded the motion. Now, Commissioners, I brought this topic for discussion, and as you know, one of the duties of the chair is to set the schedule, the meeting schedule. But I wanted to hear from the commissioners on this. I am somewhat going to be flexible, but I will say this. I'm not interested in one commissioner coming to me and saying, I need an evening meeting because I believe X and X and X, and I want to change the world. Okay? But we need to use some discretion in when we do the evening business meetings, and frankly, it needs to be noticed. Gary, how far in advance would we need to notice an evening meeting?
At least 7 days in advance.
At least 7 days. Okay. All righty. Tony, take the poll, please.
Commissioner Savas,
No.
Commissioner West,
No.
Commissioner Schull,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 3-2. Thank you very much. Gary, what's next?
All right, next, review of your business meeting agenda for tomorrow, Thursday, January 25th at 10 a.m. It's entirely consent agenda, public communication, commissioner communications. If you have any questions on any item, please let me know prior to tomorrow. Final item today is commissioner communications.
Commissioner Schull. We have Commissioner Communications.
We have Commissioner
If you want to
Communications.
speak or not, or we can wait
Doing
till.
is like issues from yesterday, yeah.
I'll hold my comments till tomorrow.
Thank you. I'm going to hold my comments too because I need to be at a meeting at 2 o'clock in person today. Commissioner West.
I'll hold my comments.
Commissioner Schrader.
I'll hold comments till tomorrow, too.
Commissioner Savas.
I have about 25 pages to read, so if you want,
Okay,
I'll hold that to another time.
Commissioner Savas, thank you. Commissioners, all, thank you very much for your dedicated, hard work today. It's very much appreciated, I know, by our constituents and staff and me as well. Thank you, and we are adjourned.